On the FY26 budget, and before we get started, we need to read in Mr. Frisch. The February 18, 2025 School Board Budget Committee meeting is called to order at 5:04 p.m.
Mr. Frisch has submitted a written request to attend this meeting virtually due to medical reasons, and he is located in the Providence District in Fairfax County. All those in favor of approving Mr. Frisch's request, please raise your hands. That is Mr. McElveen, Ms. Anderson, Mr. McDaniel, Mr. Moon, Ms. Lady, Ms. Marin, Ms. Dixit, and myself. That is unanimous for those present. I'm going to turn the meeting back over to Mr. McDaniel. Sorry, Mr. Frisch, will you please test your mic?
Testing.
Thank you. We can hear you. I'll turn the meeting back to Mr. McDaniel.
Thank you, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser. This morning, I had the distinct privilege of being an audience member at the Board of Supervisors meeting where the county executive presented his proposed FY26 budget. And the high-level notes that I'll go into really quick, the proposed transfer increase is $118 million, $7 million, an additional $7 million for capital debt, which represents a 51.5% split in revenue. So that's the high level, and with that, I'm going to turn things over to Lee, and she can give you some more details, and we'll kick things off after that.
What Mr. McDaniel said is absolutely correct. The county funding is at the same percentage that it was in the current year, which is 51.5%, and that results in $118.64 million over the previous year. Basically, that means that our current budget right now, we would have to reduce by about $121 million. And with that, I'm assuming that the House and Senate and the General Assembly, their budgets that they proposed originally are pretty closely aligned, much more so than you normally see. Normally, there's a huge distinction between the two bodies, but they're pretty close this time. So we're comfortable that we think we're going to get about $28.3 million more from the state. So the actual difference between the county transfer that we requested and what they've offered is $150 million. But we're going to, if we get the additional $28 million that the state has proposed, then that would put our gap at $121 million instead of the $150. So that's good. You should also know that that there is not anything included in the county executive's budget for the meals tax, but he did make some remarks about the meals tax. And I guess what they're considering is a 3-cent meals tax, which for a full year would generate about $96 million. But for fiscal 26, it would only be a half a year impact because it wouldn't go into effect until January 1 of 26. So it would end up being about $48 million to the county. His comments seem to suggest that they are going to discuss the meals tax at a later date, March, April timeframe, because they want to substitute the meals tax funding, not to provide FCPS with any additional funding, but to not include a 1.5 cent real estate tax rate, which is included in the county executive's budget, and then reduce that another 0.5 cent more. So the meals tax at this point would not have any impact on us at all, as he has suggested in his comments today. The max that you can do on a meals tax is 6 cents, and if someone proposed a 6 cent and that passed, that would generate an additional $192 million per year, and about half that in the first year because it only wouldn't start until January 1. And as far as the state goes, yesterday they were supposed to complete all of their committee work. And then once that all of that work is completed, then that's well, the General Assembly has until February 20th to put the bills into conference committees with final action on this coming Saturday, February 22nd. And then after that's done, then the governor may sign, amend, or veto any bill presented to him, and he has until March 24th to take that action, and the General Assembly will return for a reconvened session on Wednesday, April 2nd. So, you know, with the county, I mean, they just introduced today. With the state, it's early days. We have a lot of discussions that have to happen before we'll know our actual funding levels.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll open the floor up. Not everybody jump at once. Mr. Moon.
Excuse me, Mr. Moon.
Oh,
One thing
go
that I
ahead.
forgot to tell you is they also included in their budget document, pages 37 through 64, a list of agency reductions. You may recall that Mr. Hill announced that they were looking at a 10% reduction level. Well, his budget includes reductions that total 3.4%, not 10%. And of those reductions, there's about 7 of them that would impact Fairfax City Public Schools, like crossing guards at the high school, no, Fairfax County schools. They, like crossing guards, apparently none of the other school divisions have crossing guards at the high school level, so they've proposed reducing that. That's 16 positions. Nurses, they have apparently 30 vacancies, and so they have proposed reducing those 30 vacancies from nurses, middle school after-school program, bridge to kindergarten, an emergency step program, and a transition services for FCPS seniors. And those reductions that are on the county side, on our behalf, total $7.7 million.
And just real quick, a quick comment. This is somewhat unusual timing for us because typically we have this work session while the county is presenting its budget, but because of timing, we now know the numbers. So in addition to more conversation on our budget, the numbers that the county executive put out this morning can also help inform our conversation tonight. Mr. Moon.
Oh, thank you, Chairman McDaniel. Let me first ask you a question about county budget, county side. Is the county executive requesting budget increase for their side?
I do not know the answer to that, but my colleague Matthew might, or Alice Wigington, the budget director, is online. She may know the answer to that, but I do not.
Okay, if you can come back to me, when you have that information. With that said, with the state funding that you said $28 million you were expecting, does that include something I heard about a week and a half ago when I was down in Richmond about including just a bonus of $1,000 per instructional staff? Is that part of that, or that's bonuses on top of that, or?
Yeah, I'm not including the money for the bonuses in my analysis of the 28 million. If you look at the information I provided at the February 4th work session, it actually says 48 million because the House proposed a $1,000 bonus for all SOQ positions for fiscal 26, and the Senate proposed that for fiscal 25. But either way, it's the same amount of money, and they're one-time costs, of which the state will kick in 20.3 million, and it would cost us 36 million to do the bonus in the same way that we did it in fiscal 23, which is $1,000 for every full-time position, hourly contracted or bus drivers, and food service workers and family liaisons. And then we did like $500 for hourly workers. And then if you were just a very minimal, I think below 10 hours hourly worker, then it was $250. So if we did that in fiscal '26, just like we did it in fiscal '23, the cost to us is $36 million, of which the state's going to kick in 20. But it's all one-time funds.
I understand. My question once again is, so that 28 point some million dollar does not include that $1,000 bonus for SOQ funded positions.
It does not.
And if I ask you, what the amount of that $1,000 bonus translates into a dollar, could you tell us whether it's $36.2 million
$36.2 million.
one-time funding? Another understanding of mine on the $1,000 bonus amendment, budget amendment, was that matching was not going to be required from local school district. Is that correct? I mean, there's no condition.
That's true, but implementing what they're proposing is not really doable in the way that they propose it, because I think I've explained to you all before, and I'm just making these numbers up as an example, but I could come up with real examples if we needed to. Let's say that the state says, the SOQ says, that we're required to have one reading specialist per 1,000 kids. Then that means we need 180. And if we have 200, then that means 20 of those people are not included in that bonus because they're not SOQ positions, they're not required.
Could you have detailed response or information about this proposal so that at least, yes, I can have a better understanding of what this state legislature is including. And one more question related to that is, are you suggesting that we reject the money?
No, I'm
Okay.
suggesting that we fund it because it's one-time funds. And we've included bonuses for one-time funds in our budget proposal before to the county, and the first thing they did was take it out because it's one-time funding. And
Right.
so the 16 million, you'll, if we, it would be very surprising to me that we would reject $20.3 million. But if we don't reject it, we would have to include 16 million at year end to bring it up to the level we need.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Moon, I can attempt to address your other question earlier on. So the county's total revenue increase is about $255.5 million, of which $125 million is slated for schools. It's $118 million for the school operating support, and then $6.7 million for debt service. And then when you look at what's left after the funding they're providing to schools, there's $118 million in additional revenue for the county that they've also got disbursements related to. And then they've got $12 million unallocated, of which they've set aside $6.5 million for tourism. And then they have an unallocated balance of about $5.6 million. So their budget, expenditure-wise, they have $118 million that they're kind of increasing their budget.
So even though one of the slides that I saw earlier today, showed that they were a county executive presented, they were making certain reductions, but at the same time they were increasing their budget request. Correct?
That's correct. They do have $59.8 million in reductions. That's part of that overall $118 million increase. So without those reductions, they would presumably have a $178 million increase.
Okay, thank you. One last question that I have is, with the potential gap of this 121 million county executives, recommendation and our superintendent's request for us to request from County Board of Supervisors, $121 million. If we were to translate all the $121 million to a compensation, what's the percentage of compensation increase that we were thinking about doing under collective bargaining agreement that we would not be able to do?
Each 1% is about 30 million.
30 million, so that's about 4%.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you. That's what I have at this point. It's very concerning on my part.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. And Dr. Anderson.
Thank you. I appreciate the information that was shared today and the news, and Mr. McDaniel for sending that to us as soon as it was presented. Much appreciated. Dr. Reed, I know it's early days. I know there's lots of moving parts, but how do you want us to, how should we be thinking about this information today?
When you say this information, are you referring to the
The
counties?
county's proposal, yes.
Well, I think we should view it in the spirit it's intended. It is a proposal, and as Ms. Burden stated, it's early days in our process. We also are not clear about what the state will end up allocating, and we still have several months between now and final budget numbers.
Okay, thank you. Just to kind of help to cement that a little bit, Ms. Burden, can you share in the past few years when the counties come in under, what has been the increase generally, if any, from the proposal to the final?
Well, I know that this past year that they originally told us that we would get about 75 million. And by the time appropriation came around, our increase was 165 million or 90 million more.
Okay, so that's encouraging information. Thank you. Can you speak a little bit, if you know, in terms of, in the proposal that was shared this morning by Mr. Hill, the impact on their CBA agreements? What were they able to fully fund that, and what did that look like? What was that?
I am not familiar with their collective bargaining process.
It was stated this morning that they were honoring the collective bargaining agreements the second year that they had for those as of their advertisement.
And what was that percentage?
It's a combination of a percentage increase in their merit and step increases. So off the top of my head, I don't know the answer to that, but I know that their second year was not as substantial as the first year of their collective bargaining agreement.
Okay, thank you. And going back to the bonus, I think that's something that I had asked you during the presentation. What I believe I heard from you, it would be impossible for us to tease out because we have gone above the SOQs. So it's either we make it up or we don't do it at all.
I mean, a decision, I don't believe that the legislation contemplates giving a lesser bonus to hourly employees, which that's what we have done. You know, at the lower level, the $500, dollars for hourly folks that work a lot of hours, and then $250 for those that work very limited hours. A decision could be made not to do that, and then it wouldn't be $36 million for the $1,000. But if it's an SOQ position, how are you going to, all of the SOQ positions, pretty much, and all school divisions in Virginia, we fund more than actually is required. So trying to decide who would get the bonus and who wouldn't is,
Challenging, at best.
yeah.
So there's actually 3 tiers. There's not doing it at all, doing it for everyone like we've done, or doing it for the SOQ positions, because we go beyond that. Can you get us a list of those positions that would be eligible under the state's regulations?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. The other part of my question. You mentioned at the beginning of your statements that we have a $7.7 million decrease, crossing guards, nurses. Can you talk a little bit more in terms of the impact of the nurses? Where do we not have nurses? Are these this is actually the school impact. So we have 30 schools that need to have nurses and don't currently? And then those positions are going to be wiped away as per the decision today? As per the proposal today?
Well, this is kind of lengthy, but it says that they're going to redesign the school health model. And so I guess they believe that if they redesign that they will be able to eliminate 30 positions. We do think that even if they do that we will remain in compliance with the SOQs, because there's an SOQ for nurses and psychologists and social workers that's combined. And so we have enough psychologists and social workers that they could take this reduction in nurses, and we still would meet the SOQ requirement. We'd still be in compliance.
And while we'll be in compliance, it's not necessarily providing that medical support to students in our schools who would require it.
There's not any level of detail here as to what schools, how they would implement this. It's just that they say they're going to redesign and we'll need 30 less.
Thank you. And Bridge to Kindergarten, I think I was a little bit surprised to hear that. Bridge to Kindergarten is funded by the county, Dr. Reed? I thought that was on our list when we were talking about summer programming to be cut.
Yeah, Dr.
Or
Presidio,
reduced.
do you want to clarify that, please?
So it's a great question, and unfortunately, it's a complicated answer because our funding is all braided together. So county funding and school funding for early childhood education programs is funded together. Part of the expenditures go to support county community-based programs, and part of the expenditures that we get from the state and federal government go to support FCPS programs. So I think what they're saying with that is that they would reduce the amount of funding that we would get from the county targeted towards Bridge to K, but I haven't seen any proposals on that, so I can't really speak more about that. I did see a proposal earlier today, or got notification, I did not see a full proposal about the nursing situation where they're proposing to replace the public health nurses, registered nurses, with licensed practical nurses, so a little bit lesser level of accreditation and certification.
I see, thank you. And I'll come back to that, but just to ask one more question, Ms. Burden, with what you stated earlier, which is last year, we said we were going to do a bonus and they removed that. The county doesn't determine how we spend our funds. We determine, we present, obviously, this is our plan, but nothing prevents us from moving things around as we see our needs emerge, correct?
Correct, but generally accepted accounting principles say that you should not fund one-time costs with one-time revenue. And so they took it out because it's not an ask of them of recurring dollars. It's a one-time cost that we will have to address.
Okay. And Dr. Presidio, Bridge to Kindergarten, it's its own line item? It's not just part of the bucket of ask from FCPS? That's why it's kind of targeted in this way?
Well, I haven't seen anything on this, so I don't really want to speculate too much, but that's one possibility. I think once we get more information, obviously we'd be happy to share that with the board, but at this point, I haven't seen any proposal from the county.
Yeah, these are items that are in the county's budget on behalf of FCPS. So that particular line item is $150,000, and it's not positions. So it's braided together, so I don't really know the impact.
Okay,
We
thank
have
you.
to-
I see there's 10 seconds left. I'll have a go back.
Ms. Murin?
Thank you, Mr. McDaniel, for providing this update, and it is great to have it soon after, but certainly we haven't digested it. So, colleagues, I would like us to consider identifying our preferred future, because we are doing the same thing, and it is not working. And I am not going to go through every deduction that the county has proposed. My preferred future is a unified county budgeting process for all county-provided services and facilities. So some of my questions are, how would we like the budgeting process to unfold for the remainder of this fiscal year's process and then in the future? What information does our board need to know, and what conversations do we need to be part of and when to create a unified county budgeting process? How do we as a school board want to be partners with the Board of Supervisors? How do we want the school division to be included and considered in crafting an annual budget and long-term financial health? Do we want FCPS to manage instructional-related and core mission-related activities, including early childhood, bridge to kindergarten, school-age childcare, and any other programs? What does the work look like, this is a question for Dr. Reed, to explore the unbraiding of these funds and services, and would FCPS implement this work more efficiently? I would love as a next step, I would love out of this conversation today, to be able to show up to the Board of Supervisors next week at our scheduled 1-hour meeting, where all 22 of us are supposed to be there, or invited to attend. I would like us to show up having gotten consensus on what questions or comments we want to share as a unified voice of the board. What I'm thinking a lot about is the superintendent's executive limitation reports, where she has identified change and growth and efficiencies and savings. And while I could ask all those questions of the county board, I don't think that that's really productive. This is, I think, my 10th year going through the Fairfax County budget cycle, and I started when there was an $80 million proposed deficit back in 2015. I believe that given where we are, our local economy is very uncertain. We've got people losing jobs left, right, and center. Public education is not on a strong footing politically. We have our facilities that we know need a lot of attention. I think it would best serve us to talk about how do we get to our preferred future? What does that future look like? I think it looks like us sitting at the table with the Board of Supervisors far more often and asking to be included in the work. So I hope that you will respond to those thoughts. I'm eager to hear what you have to say.
Ms. Dixit, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Budget Chair, and I'm actually just I'm reviewing this budget presentation from the Fairfax County, and yeah, it looks like they have given us 50%, 51.5% of the general fund disbursement for 2026, but which is relatively lower from the, I guess, in the previous year. We have been seeing a decline, and I think now they're kind of maintaining at that number. Even though the cost or request from our teacher base and the need of with the collective bargaining is much higher now. There's one slide which says superintendent budget request is largest in terms of, like, it's the largest request in terms of dollar in history. I just wanted to say this is also because we have the first time in Fairfax County there is collective bargaining agreement in place, and the teachers have the right to, teachers union has the right to, ask for the raise they're looking for. If we do not do this, it's a lot of county staff, school staff was going to leave us. This is a fair, issue and warning, I guess. I did want to ask Ms. Burden, out of this $268 million we had asked for the increase, how much was going for the teacher compensation in dollar amount?
Yeah, 240 with salaries and benefits.
240 million. So this is, I think, the only request from all of us, and is to meet the request. It's first time in history of Fairfax County that we have CBA and all these Fairfax County staff members are really looking forward to this budget to be approved, and we definitely are in a crunch right now. So I would just keep advocating that we get the requests met by our staff, and this is I don't know how this is going to happen, but I guess we have to move to that goal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Dixit, and Mr. McElveen.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ms. Burden. So I was pretty surprised to hear the news about the meals tax, and that that would be undertaken with such little inspiration as to essentially cut a property tax as opposed to do something positive for our community. Those who lived through the last meals tax work, Melanie was certainly a big part of that, Mr. Moon, and others will recall that, we worked closely with the Board of Supervisors at that time to put forward a proposal that made education the core of that work. And I find it shocking that all that's been thrown aside at this point. So I guess the question I have is, at this point, and I don't know if you can answer this, Ms. Burden or Dr. Reed, is there anything that we can do to inject education back into that conversation, or has that train left the station?
Well, it's not included, there's nothing for the meals tax that is included in the county executive's advertised budget. So it would be my thinking that everything, it's all up for discussion because it's not included in any form in the county executive's advertised budget. So I think there's more conversations that can be had about that.
Okay, well, that's helpful. And I think, to Melanie's earlier point, I think we need to come armed and ready to have that discussion when we meet with them. And I think, to your other point, I think we just need to have one spokesperson because we aren't going to be able to all speak at that meeting. So that's my advocacy.
Thank you. And I will, kind of to dovetail real quick off of a point Mr. McElveen brought up, I'll send around the link once the video is posted tomorrow, so in your free time, you can go back and kind of watch the conversation around the meals tax in particular. It was very interesting and insightful. So I'll send that around tomorrow. Ms. Anderson.
Thanks for the information. So I want to say that I believe strongly that we're at a tipping point with property tax in our county as a continued funding mechanism. So I kind of understand where the Board of Supervisors is with this. Not to say that it's not disappointing to hear what they came back with, but it's also not unexpected based on what we've heard so far. So I do want to keep that in mind. I agree with Ms. Marin that we need a new path forward in terms of how we're going to do this moving forward. We have to change our model. We have to stop in business as usual, which is where we are now. And we have to stop allowing ourselves to be pitted against each other based on the way the system is set up. And we are loud voices and we can work to change the system. And so I would very much like us to go to the Board of Supervisors next week as partners in this, that we understand where they're coming from the same way we hope that they understand where we are. So I think that that's the only path forward here. Ms. Burden, I did have a question for you. In addition to our ERFC program, which I understand provides us a different benefit for our staff than other localities do, I've long since guessed that we likely have more staff in our schools than other divisions around the state, which is why we have more SOQ, more people in those SOQ positions. And so I guess my question is, have we ever done any analysis to determine that as a potential, I've talked to a lot of teachers that say, well, I'm going to go to this other location because I'm going to get more money. And I said, well, please make sure that you're looking at the staffing numbers in the school because all of that comes from somewhere. Like if we're not paying people more money, it's likely because there are more people. And so have we ever done any analysis on that?
We had, you may remember that we had ERS do a staffing study in February of 22, I think, and that's online on board docs where they did a comparison of our staffing standards. The state, of course, also frequently looks at that, and my understanding is all 132 divisions in the Commonwealth exceed the SOQ. The SOQ is considered to be the bare minimum.
Gotcha.
But you're right. If you go work in Prince William, you are going to encounter larger class sizes than you would in Fairfax.
Right. So we have a trade-off, and I think that we, again, if we're looking at all of the partners that we're sitting down at the table with, I do think we need to be honest about what our options are when we get to the point, because we're about to have more difficult conversations in terms of our funding moving forward potentially. And so I would very much be interested in figuring out the path forward on those conversations too, so that we can our primary goal here is not, obviously our goal is to make sure that our staff are well taken care of and acknowledged for the work that they do with our students. But the end goal here is to make sure our students are educated. And so we've got to figure out a path forward on that as well. So I just want us to make sure that we aren't going in next week ready for battle. I want us to lock arms instead of being in adversarial positions, so.
Thank you. And Ms. Lady?
Yeah, I agree with my colleague, Ms. Marin and Ms. Anderson. having said that, I do think it's frustrating sometimes to look at how a PowerPoint's laid out and how somebody who's not quite in the know would interpret said PowerPoint. And I'm looking particularly at the county compensation slide that's in their budget PowerPoint regarding a cost of living of 2% increase, and that's for, sort of, I guess, non-bargain units. But if you look under each of these, there's performance, merit, and longevity increases under almost every category. And we have not been doing steps. We've established the top of our teaching scale is about $50,000 less than the top of the Prince William County teaching scale. And my point in this is we've done across the board. I do know the collective bargaining moving forward does increase steps and a lower overall percentage increase. But I just want our public to understand that when you look at 70%, that's not 7%, that's not greedy. Okay, it's not greedy at all in terms of cost of living. And the fact that educators are the most educated, underpaid profession in certainly in this country, not in every country, a lot of countries that revere this work. But I just want to bring that point because we don't have merit pay. If we did, we wouldn't all collectively be trying to educate all of the children in the building. There was a point when there was merit pay, and I think it ended about the time I came into the system. So I think it ended in the late 80s. And that's because it was competition, and you didn't want competition, right? I don't want to be a best practice person who might be doing something very effectively and not share it with my colleagues because I want more money. We're not in a position to do merit pay. And I think our communities just need to understand that. And same with performance, that's the same thing. Just because you get exceeds across the board in an evaluation and someone else gets meets, that doesn't mean anything monetarily. And so I just want to bring that up. I also think it's, my next question is, and this is an assumption that, assuming, which based on looking at this, that we're not going to get exactly what we need. Although I find it interesting that the county's increase is $118 million, but the increase for us is $125 million, but we're incredibly different in size and scope. Just to put those two numbers next to each other is just incredulous from my perspective. And we do need to work with them, but that's an interesting budget point for me, where they claim reductions in places, but then their overall increase to themselves is $118 million compared to us for $125. My question, though, is, assuming we're going to have to cut, that goes back to the bargaining table, correct? As to how we would do that?
So the final budget decisions, of course, rest with the board. And if we're not able, based on the transfer from the county, to meet our collective bargaining agreement, then that would trigger a reopening in that agreement if that becomes part of the calculus to achieve the budget.
So to my colleague's point regarding class sizes, hypothetically, I would not want to vote to raise class size because of the impact it has on the teaching faculty, but that could be something that's bargained to maintain the percent raise.
I didn't want to discuss this evening what might or might not actually be bargained, because that's something reserved for the bargaining table. But I do know that there will be likely quite a bit of conversation as this process evolves, and we'll continue to provide data to support the conversation as it evolves.
Okay, thank you. I guess the better point was to just reiterate my colleague's point that our class sizes, I think, are better than most of our surrounding jurisdictions, and we'd like to keep them that way.
And Ms. Sizemore-Heiser.
Thank you. And I know this just came out today. The county meeting was just today, so there's time to digest and discuss it. I agree with my colleagues that I think we need to figure out a way to work collectively and collaboratively with our county partners. I think we all have the same goal to do what's best for our county and for our school system. So I think there's a lot of room there in the process of how we can be collaborative. Having said that, I also think that we need to balance that with the state, in the state constitution, the mandate that the school board runs the schools, right? And so we just need to find a way where we make sure that the management of the schools, the governance of the schools rests with the school board, and work collaboratively with our county partners, who I also know are strong supporters of public education. But there is a balance, and when you sometimes do things, when you combine things a lot, it may muddy those waters in terms of who's really making the decisions for a system. So just things to think about as we pursue this path of maintaining our control as per the state law and also working collaboratively. I wanted to put that in the air. I'm wondering, and I'm just going to toss this out as an idea as I'm listening, where I'm hearing, we have 1 hour to meet next week, and there's a lot of us to speak, and can we speak with more coordinated voice? And I haven't even spoken to our budget chair about this, but I'm wondering if there's a way that we can put out maybe asking for feedback and having some joint remarks that can be delivered by the budget chair or budget chair and vice chair. Doesn't mean that others can't speak, but it would perhaps help at least gather some thoughts that we all want to share, that we don't have to each individually say them. So just something to think about. If you want to comment on, that's fine, and we don't have to do it. I'm just tossing out an idea to make us a little more coordinated in our remarks towards the county. So beyond that, I look forward to digging into this. I know this is sort of the beginning of their process as well, so there may be changes coming. As far as the meals tax, I do hope some of the funding for the meals tax will go to help fund additional services, whether it's for the schools. And I think we could also maybe next week talk a little bit about where we have found deficiencies and where we have found, where we also working in partnership with the county to recognize that we can't keep putting pressure on the real estate taxes. And we're also doing our part to find our efficiencies. Might be part of the conversation next week. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take a brief turn, then we'll do a 2-minute go back round. When I heard this number this morning, there was some concern, and concern not just on the impact to our public school system, because as we all know, sitting around this table, a deficit of a shortfall, a gap, whatever word we want to phrase, of $120 million, there's not many levers that we can pull to make that up. I mean, pay, class sizes, even if we start digging into programmatic reductions, it's going to be few and far between that we could actually come up with. But I think my bigger concern, or at least a concern of a similar size, was on slide 3 of the county executive's presentation, where he talks about the uncertainty regarding the national economy. Because this budget is based on numbers that were promulgated last fall, late last fall, but last fall nonetheless. And as we almost by the hour see news of reductions to the federal workforce, whether it's federal employees or contractors or those associated industries, it's probably going to get worse, and that's going to have significant budget ramifications, not only in future years, but as we go through this process throughout the rest of the winter and into the spring. So that's something that I'm keeping in the back of my mind, which dovetails into a comment Ms. Anderson made. The baseline, the budget right now the county executive is proposing averages a $638 tax increase on the average homeowner, which some people will tolerate that. We know that. Some people won't. So I try to stay very conscious, even though that's not our decision. We're still elected leaders in the county, so I try to keep that in mind as well. And I think, at the end of the day, please call your supervisor and talk to them. I try to talk to as many of them as I can, but please help me out and pick up the phone and call your supervisor. Because being able to have those conversations, to Ms. Mirren's point, it really puts us as partners at the table. And that's going to be very important, not only this year, but going into the future. So with that, we'll go back. And the first, Dr. Anderson. Oh, I'm sorry. Chair Frisch, your hand is up for your first round.
Chair Frisch, you're muted, so we're not hearing you.
Can he hear us? We did a mic check. All right, we'll sidestep Mr. Frisch.
Chair Frisch, your hand is up. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm partying like it's 2020 with COVID over here, so I appreciate the allowance to speak virtually.
You're muted, so we're not hearing you.
I'm not muted on my end.
We can hear you.
I'm here.
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Mr. Frisch, Chair Frisch, your hand is up. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, we're having technical difficulties. We'll let IT figure this out.
Can you all hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
We're back.
I'm sorry. All right. Dr. Reed,
In our previous budget conversation, you talked a bit about the savings and efficiencies that we found and that this budget reflects, including, I think the county has said that they've found $60 million in efficiencies, and maybe you could address the 50 million on our end and the other work that's being done. I think it's important to mention that whenever we're having this conversation.
Yes, sir. We have identified those, I think we're in the neighborhood of $50 million that we do not have in this year's budget that was in a previous budget. We also have a chart, actually, that shows how much money our budget has saved over the last several years. And Ms. Burden, I think, will be providing that shortly. We can certainly have it to the board prior to the joint meeting with our Board of Supervisors. Ms. Burden, do you happen to have those notes in front of you? Maybe you can look at those while I'm commenting. But I do think, to your point, Mr. Frisch, we're going to work to make sure we enumerate those cost-cutting measures, and we continue to look at efficiencies within our budget to make sure that we're being thoughtful stewards of the public monies.
Thank you. And as to the conversation from my colleagues, I would be supportive of coming up with something more collective to share at the meeting to make the conversation more fruitful. Thanks.
Thank you. And Lee, did you have a follow-on?
I did. If you look in the approved budget document, in the appendix is always a pretty lengthy section about all of the reductions that we've made over the past, when does it go back to, 2009? So a long time. And the total amount that we have cut from our budget since then is over $800 million.
And we had a pretty significant cut in '23, is my recollection as well. So I think what we haven't done is talked a lot about those cuts, but they have certainly been verified, and I think we need to, I think several board members have asked for us to surface those perhaps and enumerate those more thoughtfully, but we continue to try to do more with less. So I know we'll be able to provide those numbers, Mr. McDaniel.
Thank you. And go back, and we'll keep it 2 minutes. You're going to do, yeah, you're on the list. The first one was Dr. Anderson, followed by Mr. Moon.
Thank you. We'll be super quick. As one of the board members who've asked for those numbers in terms of our savings, Dr. Reed, when do you anticipate we will have that information? I don't know when our next budget meeting is or work session.
Well, we have the macro numbers. What we are working on is the enumeration of the specifics, like program pieces. But we do have the numbers, so I would think within the next week we could have that information for you.
Okay, thank you. The other thing that I think we should raise in this conversation with the Board of Supervisors, and I do lend my support to having an organized discussion rather than being in 50,000 different directions, because, the climate is bleak. I do appreciate, what's happening in our area. We have a lot of federal employees who have lost their jobs, so there's a lot at stake here. But we also have to raise in this discussion, and I don't know if this is how we're going to get those topics, the potential of the impacts of our own federal dollars. That is going to be something we will have to deal with if that occurs, that I hope we can raise in this conversation with the Board of Supervisors. I mean, granted, they might be in a similar position, but we still need to instruct our 180 plus thousand students. I lost the number here. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Moon, followed by Ms. Mirren.
I guess this goes more to, Chairman Mr. McDaniel, that we'll adopt our budget on Thursday, and then we do not make a presentation. We have a joint meeting with the County Board of Supervisors next week, next Tuesday, but after that, we wait. Are we just basically waiting until we make a I take that back. We make a presentation to the County Board of Supervisors, even though they already know our request, on April 22nd. and County Board of Supervisors make a decision on transfer to us on May the 6th. That's their markup day. That's a markup day. I'm hoping that if we must deal with a gap in the magnitude of $121 million, that we do schedule further work sessions amongst us and have a discussion about potentially how we're going to address the gap, so that by the time Board of Supervisors has to make a decision, they will know that what kind of cuts the school board may have to institute, whether it's going to be program, class size, compensation. I mean, we don't have to make those decisions, but what could be potentially be done? I think you probably remember, Mr. McDaniel, because you were working on the county side in those days, that school board routinely had those discussions and presented to the county supervisors to let them know that these may be the consequences.
Yeah, and on that, so yes, we have our joint meeting next week. The board will advertise the rate, which, as many people know, caps the maximum revenue based on the highest advertised rate. So I think at that point, that would be probably the best timing to have maybe an additional work session once we have a better kind of understanding of what that max revenue number is going to look at. So I will work with the chair to schedule more, and I'll also work with the chair to come up with some either a joint statement or some talking points that we can share around for our joint meeting next week.
Thank you.
Ms. Mirren.
Thank you, colleagues, for sharing your thoughts and support for working together. I appreciate and would love to have the budget chair and vice chair share remarks, but I would like us to get more pointed into what are our asks, not just remarks, but asking for specific things. So I've kind of outlined two categories of asks. One of them is to meet together regularly. What does that look like for now until the budget vote? Is it the budget committees? Is it the superintendent and the county executive? What does that look like? The second one is to start creating agendas where we're looking at paths to consider to improve the budgeting process / create more revenue. So that's things like discussing setting an established percentage that's going to annually be transferred, so we could stop wasting our time with this discussion of if it's 0.10% less or not. We can all plan better, too, when we know what to expect. Exploring the revenue generation options for our facilities, whether that's the bond, public-private partnership, all those things that we were going to talk about on May 6th. They have the financial knowledge for that. I'd like to know what kinds of financial analysis is happening by agency. We do our own, we do projections on our student populations. Let's share that. Working together on collective bargaining, let's do that more effectively. I think we could take visits to our schools and show them what's happening. We could also visit some of the county facilities, but, I go to libraries quite a lot. And also, what about our plans to get the money from the state? Because, Mr. McDaniel, you mentioned it's about $600 more per taxpayer. I recall Mr. McKay saying it was over $1,000 with that missing JLARC money. I want to say it was $1,200 or $1,400. I can't find it. So, Dr. Reed, I would love, and I'd love again to hear your comments, colleagues, can we bring to that Board of Supervisors meeting copies of your executive limitation reports where you have shown those efficiencies? I'm particularly thinking of HR, of safety, things that are common to both of us. And the one thing that I will continue to go after, though, is we are not paying for law enforcement services. We are not going to pay for crossing guards, and we will not be, saddled with that work that is the county's work to protect adults and children.
So I do think we can come with data for that meeting. I think we also maybe can do a synthesis like of the ELs, although I can also provide those directly. It's whatever your preferences are at this point.
Thank you. And Ms. Dixit.
Thank you, Mr. McDaniel. I'm just pointing to the comment you made about the third slide from the county budget, said the economy, national economy, our region will get impacted. I do understand that. Most of our employees I mean, many of our employees are federal workers or working in the government contracting space, so they're definitely getting impacted. However, there's a downwards trend in the housing prices. There's already reports on Twitter, should not say Twitter, but any other channels too, but that this downward trends on the prices of the homes has already started to happen. It may have not reflected in your particular neighborhoods, but that's going to decrease the amount of, I believe, amount we pay in taxes per year. So even that percentage increase is happening, it's going to maybe actual dollar value, it's going to be reduced. That could be the reason. The last point I wanted to say is we are here for the Fairfax County children, Fairfax County employees and people who live here. So it's ultimately, these are not a separate set of children who have come from somewhere else. They're all the children of the residents. So ultimately, we're looking out for them and giving them the best education we can get. They can get in the country. People move to Fairfax for a reason, and we believe in the vision of one Fairfax. And I want to say that at this time of uncertainty with what's going on, I think we just have to join hands and work together and just make it a better place for all our students and all our staff members. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And seeing no others, as of 5:59 PM, the meeting of the Budget Committee is adjourned.
We are now transitioning from the Budget Committee meeting to the work session on middle school start times. This February 18th, 2025 School Board Work Session is called to order at 6:07 PM, is what I can see with a little light. Mr. Frisch has submitted a written request to attend this meeting virtually from his residence in the Providence District due to medical reasons. All those in favor of approving Mr. Frisch's request, please raise your hand. That is Mr. Dunn, Ms. Dixit, Ms. Marin, Ms. Lady, Mr. Moon, Mr. McDaniel, Ms. Anderson, Mr. McElveen, Dr. Anderson, and myself. That is unanimous for those present. Mr. Frisch, can we please test your mic again? Mr. Frisch, if you're trying to speak, we can't hear you. Mr. Frisch, it shows you're muted on our end. I'm not sure if it's on your end or... But now we can see you, but we still can't hear you. Can we please test your mic again?
I'm here.
Okay, we heard you. Thank you, Mr. Frisch. I will turn the meeting now over to Dr. Reed for the presentation and then the conversation.
Thank you, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser. So this evening, I'm pleased to introduce our Chief Operating Officer, Andy Muick, who has been working on this project, honestly, for over a year. And we're very pleased to provide you a presentation that looks at options, both the options you looked at in December, as well as a new hybrid option that the team has worked hard to produce. So at this time, let me turn the presentation over to Mr. Muick.
Thanks, Dr. Reed. Just a couple introductions of some teammates that are here with me tonight. To my left is Dr. Tasha Prieto, the owner and president of Prismatic Services Incorporated, our consultant. She's been our lead consultant on this project as well. To my right, I've got Paul DeAndrade, our Executive Director of Transportation, and have three more teammates in the wings behind you. Paul Hatcher, our Director of Administrative Services, and that includes community use, in case there's any specific questions there later. Michelle Phillips on the front row over there. She's one of our two Assistant Directors in Transportation, and she leads the routing team. And then Tom Horn on the side over here, our Executive Director of Student Activities and Athletics, in case there's some specific questions I can't answer on that. With that, we'll go to the next slide. And I will turn it over to Dr. Prieto for a little bit of background.
Good evening.
I'm just going to try to put us all on the same page again with some bits of background information to make sure that the conversation has some of the same initial facts. Current situation in the school system, just to remind everyone, right now middle schools are at 7:30, secondary schools are at 8, high schools are at 8:10, and elementary schools are, in my notes, all over the board from 8:10 to 9:20, predominantly from 8:30-ish to 9:20. The objective that led to this project, just to keep the end in mind, was to develop an action plan to help the school board attain its goal of starting middle school at or after 8 a.m. while keeping secondaries and high schools at or after 8 a.m. And so then, some other things to keep in mind. We do have evidence that the 2015-16 middle school, secondary, high school start time changes resulted in Fairfax High School students getting more sleep, but middle school students getting less sleep. And we have a couple different pieces to that. There was a research study that was published in 2017, Drs. Temkin and Lewin, that talked about sleep, amount of sleep attained, looked at different 8 of the high schools, 3 of the secondary schools, and a variety of the middle schools, did some good pre-post survey work. One of the things that they found was that fears about sports changes were not realized. They also found that with the start time change in 2015-16, your high school students were sleeping for 30 more minutes on average. They were going to bed 10 minutes later, but they were getting up about 40 minutes later in the morning. At the same time, your middle school students were getting less sleep. They switched from 8 o'clock to 7:30, and they were getting 15 minutes less sleep, and during that, as part of that study, they were reporting more daytime sleepiness and more struggles to stay awake. We also had a memo that was provided to Fairfax County in 2018 on the overall results of the multitude of studies that were done by various researchers as a result of the 2015-16 changes. And that also found middle school students were getting a loss of sleep of about 30 minutes in some cases and 15 minutes in other cases, depending on whether they were secondary or at a middle school. So we have evidence that the changes that were made in the last time around, in the case of the high school students, moving them to a later start time had its intended effect. High school students were getting more sleep. The unintended effect of the middle school students going to an earlier start time was that they were getting less sleep. Then, in order to provide some context, and it's part of Appendix C that Prismatic submitted in the draft report, we did do an update of the literature. The report that was provided to the district in 2015, 16, and 2014 for Blueprint included a literature review and some results of that. We sought to update that as well as to look at specific impacts on middle school students. And so we've got a number of pieces in Appendix C. We just provided to you the abstract and some conclusions from those studies. I'm going to run through them really briefly just so we all have some of the same research in mind. For athletics, we've got 3 different studies in there ranging from, 2017 down to 2014 that increased sleep duration and increased quality of sleep for adolescents makes for better athletes. It reduces injuries and increases athletic performance. Looking at other physical impacts, we included a couple different studies on the role of poor sleep for adolescents and later onset use of alcohol. There was a really interesting study that started with middle school students, measured them over the course of 4 years, and those with poorer sleep habits in year 1 increased their odds of drinking by year 4, which is when they're in high school. We also have a couple of studies in there that talk about insufficient sleep among middle schoolers and early adolescents, leading to more frequent soda consumption and less frequent vegetable consumption, as well as precursors for obesity. A couple of studies that looked at that. And in several of those studies, they were able to tie it to earlier school start times, leading to the loss of sleep. Moving out of physical outcomes and into school performance outcomes, there are a couple of studies in there ranging from 2015 to 2022 that talk about less sleep for middle schoolers, resulting in lower school attendance, higher out-of-school suspensions, multiple outcomes in terms of tardiness being correlated to lesser sleep or earlier start times for middle schoolers, as well as negative health effects, mental health effects. Looking at academics, there were a number of studies included in there that talk about the impact of middle school start times on academics. There was an really interesting one done in 2012, which looked explicitly at middle school students in Wake County, North Carolina. And it's interesting because that's also a very large school district. And they looked at the variation in academic performance with day of school start time as the variable. And they found a 2% gain when middle school started later. And that was on math scores. And so I think that was compelling. Another one that associated earlier school start times with less sleep and also lower academic performance. That was a 2017 study. And then finally, one study that I think speaks to some of the concerns that were raised in some of the forums is if we end up changing elementary school students to earlier start times, what is the impact there? And there was a 2021 study done by Dr. Meltzer and others that really actually looked at that. And looking at a longitudinal study, large scale, representative, they looked at elementary school start time shift from 9 a.m. to 8 a.m. And they found that had no impact on elementary students' sleep or daytime sleepiness. So that buttresses some of the earlier research that we've seen that earlier academic start times for elementary students do not result in lower academic performance. And so lots packed into the one piece of Appendix C that is the literature review. The other part of Appendix C is the case studies. And then a couple of other points that we think that are important to keep in mind. Nationally, 66% of middle schools already start at 8 a.m. or later, based on the most recent data that we have. And then finally, what led us to this point. We've received substantial community input from a variety of ways. One of the spring forum attendance across the multiple in-person and the one online forum had over 700 attendees. Our surveys in the fall had 5,400 student responses, 8,200 parent responses, and 1,400 staff responses. In addition, we did a spring survey of bus drivers in attendance that had 600 responses. So we've had substantial input that led us to the development of the options that were provided to you in December, and then the subsequent additional option later.
Thanks, Dr. Prieto. We're on the next slide, option summary. I just want to take a minute to go through this slowly since, we saw it back in December. We've got a new option in there, C2, and just wanted to take a minute or two to walk through it just to make sure we have that fresh in our mind for the discussions. So on the left side, you can see our current school start time option or schedule. Option A has elementary going first, secondary going second, middle school third, and then high school fourth. It's got a run time of 90 minutes, and that's relative to our current run time of 110. And it could be no cost or 0 to 25 buses or 0 to $1.8 million. Option B has part of the elementary school, the 8 o'clock start times going first, then secondary and high schools both at 8:30. Heading back for middle school at 9, and then the final group of elementary schools fourth. Option C, and option B also has an 80-minute run time, 30 minutes less than what we currently do. 20 to 30 buses and a 1.4 to 2.1 million. Option C is, again, the 8 o'clock group of elementary going first, secondary and high schools sticking together at 8:30, going back to the elementary school for the 9 o'clock run, and then getting middle schools at 9:30. C2 is an iteration that Dr. Reed referred to that we had asked Dr. Prieto and her team to take a look at after December. It has a 90-minute run. C has a 90-minute run, and it was cost neutral to 1.1 million and potentially 0 to 15 buses. The reason we'd asked for the iteration was, as I've mentioned once or twice already, our current run time is 110 minutes. We in transportation were not as confident in the ability to get down to an 80-minute runtime, to shave 30 minutes off of it. Dr. Prieto and her team have a lot of confidence in our routing team, which I do as well, and the new Tyler routing system that we're implementing right now as we speak. But we liked C2, and we just wanted to have a runtime that maybe we felt more confident in, which led to C2, with elementary going first at 8, the first group of them. The secondary and high school staying second at 8:30, back for elementary at 9:10, and then middle schools at 9:40. Option D, as a reminder, that was the option that just had moving middle schools 90 minutes later to 9 o'clock, and option E was a shift of all schools 30 minutes to the right. And option D was potentially the most expensive. 6.4 to 17.3 million if we went with that one. Kevin, next slide, please. So the Office of Transportation recommendation, we picked option C2, the new iteration, change concentrated at the middle school, some incremental changes at high school and elementary school level, could be cost neutral, and it was achievable runtime in our opinion. We left option E on there as well. That was what we had recommended back in December, and we still felt that that was a suitable option as well if we decided to go that route instead. And the reasons for that are listed there below. The next slide, I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Prieto so she can talk about Prismatic's recommendations from those alternatives.
So I'd like to emphasize that all of the options that we provided to you meet RFP criteria. And so for that, at that level, Prismatic's completely agnostic as terms of which option might be the best. We did note that much of the language of the RFP that was used to kick this project off mirrored that of what was used in developing the 2014 RFP. And for that reason, perhaps the use of secondary at or after 8:30 was not used in the original RFP. But if you were to, try to marry both the intentions of the school board in the RFP as well as the body of evidence that indicates that secondary should be at 8:30 or later, Prismatic would fall into the category of saying that options B, C, and C2 are all meet both sets of criteria. They are all similar in terms of cost. They are all similar in terms of the number of elementary schools that will change start times. And just to give you some data on that, we looked at the number of elementary schools that would change more than 30 minutes, either going more than 30 minutes earlier or going more than 30 minutes later. B, C, and C2 are all pretty much equivalent. 69 that would have that major change, 58 in B, 58 in C, 61 in C2. We then looked at how many elementary schools would be at the earlier start time versus the later start time in each one of the options. They turned out to be exactly the same. That wasn't by design, it just ended up being that way. You would have 67 schools at the earlier start time and 72 schools at the later start time in each one of those options. The average start time change for elementary schools is again about the same. On average, option B, elementary schools go about 18 minutes earlier. In option C, they go about 28 minutes earlier. And then in option C2, they go about 23 minutes earlier. And again, those are all averages. And so, not much of a difference in terms of what might be the change impact for the elementary population. So we really did not have a favorite within those, but we recognize that C2 is the point of commonality with the Transportation Department and the COO. The only reasons we do not recommend A, D, and E are because they do not meet AAP and other body guidelines for starting secondary at or after 8:30.
Next slide, Kevin. Thank you. In this slide, we were hoping, what we were trying to do was show the alignment between the transportation team and Prismatic in terms of our recommendations. You can see there, just laid it out again, that Prismatic recommended B, C, and C2, and C2 was the recommendation of the Office of Transportation. B and C, we did not recommend due to the potential cost and the reduced runtime risk. Again, just cutting that much time off our current runtime was a little bit more risk than we were willing to take. And then option E, again, is just listed on there. We had that in December, and we feel that's a good backup option as well. Kevin, next slide, please. And this is the last slide before discussion, and this is the options of parallel or sequential. We recommend parallel with the boundary adjustments in school year 26-27. You can see a lot of the reasoning why there, but key is it allows the projects to better inform each other. One disruptive period for the community and all stakeholders. It allows us time to fully implement that Tyler routing system that we have going on right now and getting a year of getting used to it, and time for proper change management. You know, good communications plan with us and the boundary team in terms of trying to look ahead at potential problems, getting some solutions in there, working with the community, further engagement, everything you would have in a good change management plan to hopefully make it a very seamless and smooth implementation in 26-27. And that is the last slide for the presentation, and we can shift over to discussion if that works for everybody. And Kevin, would you mind putting that slide 3 back up there? That's probably the best one to have.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and start with Ms. Marin, followed by Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. This continues to be fascinating work. The goal of this is to allow children to arrive at school better ready to learn and succeed as the result of a healthy night's sleep. This is the operational analysis and recommendation. This would move the children in and out at more optimal times to meet the objective. But we also have parameters that influence how well we can achieve that goal. And so I'm interested in understanding more about the implications of this operational recommendation on the provision of instruction. Namely, how will the instructional schedule fare along with such an operational change? How will staffing be impacted based on reliable data, not generalizations? So first, I have questions about the principal's input, which is on page 10 and 11 of the report. I'd like to know, Dr. Reed, how their input and recommendation was considered by you and the Office of Transportation Services in developing options and selecting the recommendation of C2 and E.
So thank you, Ms. Marin. I know that Mr. Muick certainly met with the executive boards for our principal associations and engaged in conversation. So perhaps, Mr. Muick, you could share how those recommendations influenced the recommendations.
Yes, well, we did have conversations going throughout with the different principal associations as we were leading into this, but I'd say many of their points were already on the table, either from other venues where we got input or from other constituents. So a lot of these were being considered already in terms of some of the impacts on after-school sports, different things like that.
Well, I'm specifically, I'm unclear about how the instructional experience or daily student schedule was considered. So for instance, in some of the principal feedback, there's a comment, an elementary school concern about the reading block and lunchtime being disrupted, or a middle school concern about field trips no longer being feasible. Is this accurate? Was this considered?
The lunch block is not an independent fixed time spot in there, so the lunch block would shift with the start and finish time of the school, as long as it falls between 10 and 2, which is a federal guidance. Same with the field trip. The field trip was not a fixed independent block from 9 to 1. It could float however we needed to float throughout the day. So any of these changes did not require any changes of instructional blocks. So you wouldn't lose language arts in the morning. You wouldn't have an impact on reading later. And had a little discussion during the Middle School Principals Association meeting today about that as well.
Well, that's a relief to hear. The comment is bullet number 6 regarding our staff, our most important asset. The number of staff that may need to shift teaching levels, middle school to high school, et cetera, because of family needs. When we moved to early start times for middle school, many staff had to leave to go to high school as a result. Is there quantifiable data to substantiate the, quote, number of staff that may need to shift teaching levels by proposed implementation time of school year 26-27?
I don't have that data, and it seems that it would be a bit speculative because we haven't, to my knowledge, surveyed staff about what those moves might be. But perhaps, I know you did do some surveys, Mr. Muick. Was that one of those?
No, ma'am, it was not. But I did talk with, I have been talking with HR, William Solomon, and he's going to try to see what he can pull together data-wise from like 2014, 15, 16 to see if that data shares anything. But there's not a lot of why in any of that in terms of transferring, why people left, why they moved, was it a family issue?
Yeah, thanks. I also agree that it's speculative, and it's also based on 10 years ago when life was very different, and who can know, who's going to plan to have a baby or, do whatever is going to happen in life. Similarly, with students having jobs before or after school, it seems speculative. And as a side note, this raises a question about parking. I mean, all of that stuff, like, do we have data on who needs a parking spot to go? So that's beside the point. I also wanted to mention, so that was my first set of questions. My second one is about the schedule considerations, which were in the chapter 4 of Prismatic's work. One of them was about bus ridership. What percentage of our students ride buses by school level? And of those assigned a bus service, what percentage actually ride the bus round trip or one way? And those assigned who don't ride, what are they doing? I mean, this is important to know because if we're providing buses to kids who aren't taking them, then that's a different challenge. We also talk about safe routes to school. So there are these things I don't see where they're intersecting. I have other questions about the neighborhood and community services. Neighborhood and community services, is that entirely a department of FCPS, or is that also partly managed by Fairfax County?
It is, so we manage community use, the scheduling of our facilities to all the potential community users. The county's team, which is Neighborhood Community Services, NCS, they are the go-between between us and all the different athletic, Burke basketball, Fairfax County athletic community. So you kind of have three groups that are being scheduled in our schools, our schools and their related organizations, PTAs, PTOs, boosters. That's number one. Then number two is NCS, which is the county and all those FCAC athletic programs. And then the third is the non-NCS group, which would be Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, religious groups, HOAs. They come directly into us and we schedule them in the remaining spots.
Got it. I'm always fascinated about community use. So that's another plug for us to work more closely with the county. And also, I think it's important to know, are we talking about school-associated events like PTA-sponsored clubs and even our own athletics programs, as opposed to truly outside of FCPS organizations like sports clubs? I think that needs to be pulled out.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Would you like to go back? Okay. Next, Ms. Anderson, followed by Mr. Frisch, and then
I want to start by saying that I think all of us understand the importance of having our kids get the sleep necessary. So I don't think any of us here are questioning whether or not this is necessary for our kids. And I believe that I've said that since the beginning to anyone that I've talked to about this. I am extremely concerned about the fact that we have been advertising this as a middle school start time change when it impacts every single time. So we have to stop calling it that. We have to start calling it school start time changes, because it is disingenuous for us to call it anything else when we have an entire community of people that are not necessarily just in the 2, sometimes 3 grades that we're talking about. So I would advocate strongly for us changing that in terms of the way that we're discussing this. The other thing is, was any consideration given to surveying all families?
You want me to answer that? We attempted to do that in the fall of 2024. The surveys were designed for all families.
Was it distributed to all families?
The distribution was left to the school system, and as I understand it, perhaps some miscommunications happened, and they ended up primarily being only distributed within the middle school community.
So I don't think that we can make, I will just say that I don't think we can make decisions until we actually follow through with the survey as designed. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is, where with the surveys that were conducted, were they included in all 7 languages that we traditionally do the surveys in?
They were I don't remember if it was all 7, but we definitely provided at least 3 other alternative languages. I would have to go back and check.
Okay.
98% of the responses came in English, however.
Okay, so that is also concerning to me. I want to make sure that we are moving forward with accurate information and feedback from the entire community, because this will affect the entire community. I have a number of questions here, and I'm already on the list for a go back, but I will say that the other aspect of this that I'm thinking of, and this is just because you mentioned Wake County. When I went and looked at Wake County, they have not made a decision about their high school start times. So yes, their middle school start times are later, but their high school start times are at our middle school start times. So I think it's somewhat disingenuous also to say that when we see the report and things like that, and it says 67% of middle school start times start later than at the 8:30. How many high schools start at 7:30? So again, I don't want to just keep moving this as a way to potentially look like we're solving a problem, but not. I think that we need to make sure that we are going forward in a very concise and straightforward way with all members of the community, so that we bring them all with us, so it doesn't look like we're forcing decisions down. The other thing that I would like to put out there, and I know that there's a huge push from several communities related to getting this done for next year. We are in the middle of an entire change model going on across our county. The daycare system cannot support the current change related to what's happening with the go back to work or go back to the office that's going on within the federal government. And we have zero idea what our traffic patterns are going to do related to that. So I cannot say strongly enough that we should follow the recommendation that we at least need to put this until 26, 27, so that we can have more opportunity to take those things into account.
You're already on the go-back list, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Frisch, followed by Dr. Anderson. Mr. Frisch, go ahead.
Thank you. Some questions for Mr. Muick.
Mr. Frisch, just pause
Excuse
for
me.
a second. It's very light. I don't know if that's on our end or your end, but we can barely hear you.
Mr. Frisch, I think it's on our end. If you can give us a second, we're having to fix between online and in person. 1 second.
Okay,
Thank you for the patience.
no worries.
Mr. Frisch, can you try again?
Yes. Is this better? Hello?
Mr. Frisch, it's not, can we go to Dr. Anderson, or would that mess up what you're trying to do?
Unfortunately, I think we kind of need to hear him, so
Okay.
1 second, please.
Thank you for your patience as we deal with the technical difficulties.
I would like my 2 seconds back. I'm just kidding.
Can we reset his time, please? We heard that one.
Try again, Mr. Frisch.
Is this any better?
Yes, that is better,
Yeah.
a little bit.
All right. And I've just created the infinity screen. Mr. Muick, once the technology onboarding has completed, how quickly after that do you think we'll be able to see whether there are, increased efficiencies that result from that might pivot our thinking a little bit here?
Mr. Frisch, that's a great question. I may have to ask one of my teammates here, just because I haven't implemented a new transportation system at this level before, so I don't know how quickly they may see results. I don't know, Paul or Dr. Prieto, if you have any thoughts on
Because
that.
if I'm not mistaken, it's August is when they'll be finished with the installation.
Yes, sir. The implementation started at the very end of January, and it should be fully implemented by the beginning of this coming school year, 25-26. And at that point, we should be, as long as the pilot on the mobile data tablets is successful over the summer, we should be implementing the mobile data tablets as well. So yes, we should have the Tyler routing system up and running at the beginning of the school year.
I can pause for the other answer.
Mr. Andrade, is there?
Yes. So I think once we have full technology upgrades within the routing software and the MDT, we'll be able to fully realize the efficiency of the routes, to include how many students are riding once they tap on and off of the buses. So I would say at least a semester, 6 months after that, we'll really have some good knowledge and be able to adjust from there.
Okay. So, like by spring of the following school year.
That's correct.
All right. I think that's good information. As I've talked to my constituents, I think they're where our board is in terms of wanting movement on middle school start times and start times generally that align with best practices for student health. I think there are a lot of questions still out there. Received an email from SEPTA just today with some questions about how this might impact the ride times for special education students. Ms. Anderson has raised some good questions. Looking at the options before us, I'd probably be torn between C and C2. I don't want to push, and my constituents certainly don't want to push elementary start times to nearly 10 a.m. It's not as easy as us. We simply don't have the funding to do a change that would have little impact, in any kind of negative way on all students. So I'm eager to hear the rest of the conversation from my colleagues, and to continue to gather more information, and get some more answers here.
Thank you, Mr. Frisch. Dr. Anderson?
Thank you. I'm kind of glad to hear the conversation regarding whether or not this needs to happen, because I think the science is irrefutable. This is what's best for kids. And I'd like for us to center that in every conversation that we have. I've said this before on other topics. And I know sometimes what is best for kids is definitely inconvenient, but sometimes that's what we have to do. And I want to add my voice to the chorus of getting some more data, because there's a lot of information that's been shared that I'd like some more information about. Particularly, do we have any numbers to lead us to be thinking about how many of our high school students who work or watch their younger siblings? Have we been able to gather any of that information in any of the forums, surveys?
So two-part question, so two-part answer. The Fairfax County Youth Survey, which is done almost every year, it's outside of Prismatic, so this is their data. And their most recent data points for the fall of 2022 indicated that 31% of your grade 12 students had some sort of outside employment, went to work 1 hour or more per school day. That's on page 4-26 of our report. The interesting piece about that is that the difference in the percentage of students who worked outside of school during the school day, if you look at the change from 2014 to the 2015-16, when we had the disruption there with school start time changes for high school students, the percentages didn't change. The same percentage of students were going to some sort of outside work 1 hour plus per school day. And then the question about the students providing supervision to siblings, we did ask that question. We asked it in the parent survey and in the student survey. The student survey, we asked it of middle schoolers. I'm sorry, we may not have asked it. Yeah, we did ask it. Oh, are you currently responsible for taking care of your younger siblings after school on weekdays at least once per week? At the middle school, 23% said yes. At the secondary school, 22% said yes. We asked the similar question of parents. Do you rely on your middle schooler to take... do you rely on your middle school student to take care of younger siblings after school at least once a week? These are largely middle school parents who may also be parents of other students because of what I said earlier about the distribution of surveys. We did have representation of parents at elementary, middle school, and high school, but they probably came into the survey as middle school parents. And so 15% of them said yes. So
Okay.
my conclusion was at least some middle schoolers think they're responsible for more than they actually are, but 15%.
Thank you. My community has been parts of Fairfax County that's been very vocal on this, and I'm particularly proud of that because I think when I first got on this board, it was that we weren't hearing from the Mason District on the things that were important to them. So for me, that's a huge shift. And that may be primarily driven because we have the 3 middle schools where it's a 3-year experience, not a 2-year experience. And so the timeline has been especially important to this community. And so one of the questions that I wanted to raise is the RFP, when it was put forward, was to help with was to support a 24-25 implementation. What happened between the RFP, which was very clearly articulated to support that timeline, and now we could essentially be speaking about, well, we're not essentially, we're speaking about a 26-27 timeline.
Dr. Prieto, do you know what the delay
I
was
can
in
answer
that?
part of that from what we see. The RFP was issued in January of 2023, which included, being done by September of 2023. It was not actually awarded to Prismatic until the end of September, end of October 2023. And so when I sat down for a meeting with then the executive director of transportation, we had a conversation, but I'm not sure how we're supposed to finish a month before award. But at that point, we adjusted the timeline to fit where we were. We did have a conversation, and Mr. DeAndrade was there about, do we need to be done in time for a potential 24-25, because that's what the RFP said. And at that point, that was October. That was when we found out that the executive director of transportation would be retiring at that point. Wasn't certain as to who would be the executive director. And I'm sorry, I don't remember if you had started by then or not.
I started at the end of October, yeah.
Okay,
Me
so
and Chuck.
so there was a leadership transition period there, but the procurement process took from January until beginning of October, essentially, which made it a little difficult to meet. Well,
Sure.
made it impossible to meet that.
Sure. Dr. V, can you speak to that a little bit in terms of the procurement not getting to, I guess, the vendor until September 2023?
Yeah, our procurement processes are quite thorough, and I can certainly get back to you on what happened in this case, the letting of an RFP, the bidding of the RFP, the cyber and data security agreements that need to be maintained. So I can certainly get back to you with that. I don't have the details, but I do know that our procurement is a thorough and often lengthy process.
Thank you. Can you speak a little bit to how the options could potentially impact athletics? And if you can also compare this to, and I don't know if you're able to do that, but with the high school change that was done in 2015, because I know the concern around athletics was very present then as well.
I can answer you with data from the Fairfax County Youth Survey again, pages 410 and 411. They asked the questions, if you participate in extracurricular activities. The Exhibit 4.6 is school extracurricular activities, which would include athletics as well as other things. Exhibit 4.7 is extracurricular activities outside of school. Both of them ask if you're participating with them on a school day. And in each case, you can see that there was no decline in participation from the fall of 2014 to the fall of 2015. And then you look at the fall of 2016 just to see if the trend is going to hold. Really very little difference. In fact, the 12th grade participation from fall of 2014 to fall of 2015 went up by 3 percentage points. Probably not statistically significant, but it did go up. And what we do see in these data is that things are different post-COVID, but that is the schedule change does not seem to have impacted that. We did talk to various representatives of external organizations as well as athletics as part of this project, and generally received assurances that they would be able to adjust depending on what options were selected. Some things may be a little trickier than others, but that they would be able to adjust.
Thank you. And I also appreciate, let me go back a little bit. I really appreciate this report. It was very thorough. There were a lot of pages to be read, and I definitely appreciate the details. But on one of the pages that I can't recall, you talked about our neighboring schools and their start times. Now, Loudoun County, full disclosure, I work there. Their time was elementary first, middle, and high school. And I can't recall what time their high schools let out. It's after 4. Did we have any conversations with counterparts there, Mr. Muick, in terms of that impact on any student activities or all of the things that all of the variables that we're looking at?
The Loudoun County COO didn't have anything to report negative. He said, hey, it all worked out. I think their high school, I was looking for the time, their high school finishes at, gosh, I want to say 4:30, but no, that's not right.
Not that late.
But no, he didn't have anything like, hey, it was a failure, we don't like it. It's been positive.
Okay, I see there's 9 seconds left. I'd like a go back, please.
I got you down, thank you. Ms. Lady, followed by Ms. St. John Cunning. Mr. McElveen, then Ms. Lady.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to thank board leadership for bringing this to a work session very, very quickly after our last session. And I also want to thank staff for the ongoing collaboration with Dr. Prieto and Prismatic. It's great to see that you guys have really taken in and internalized the work that came to us previously and tried to find a no-cost solution that's similar. I think where I stand is similar to what Mr. Frisch conveyed, is that my preference would be option C over C2 slightly, just because it keeps times a little more reasonable. But again, I appreciate the options there. So building a little bit on what Dr. Anderson said and what I said at our previous session, I do think we need to, for the community's sake, come to a conclusion as soon as possible, ideally tonight, with a consensus on moving forward with this, because otherwise we just continue to spin wheels without the community having any understanding if we're actually committed as a board to doing this. So again, I'd like those leading the session to consider taking consensus of the board that we're committed to making a change. We don't need to know what the change is, but that's what set us up for success back in 2015, is that we took the strong step of making that commitment, and that helped propel us forward to a solution that the community appreciated. Ultimately, I think our job and our work is to get to yes on this, and if not tonight, then when. So a lot of questions have been raised, and colleagues are well positioned to raise them. But what I would say ultimately is that when you make a change like this, things adjust. Things adjusted very well in 2015 without really any substantive community concerns in the years that followed. Your daycare adjusts, your sports adjust, the community moves forward with what the board decides. So I will just leave it at that for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Lady?
Thank you. And again, thank you to staff. This is a lot of work, and it's a great report. But I do want to echo some of the things my colleagues have said. This needs to be titled Moving Forward, K-12 Start Times, because it's impacting K-12. I continue to have a lot of cognitive dissonance around the fact that we did not survey all levels, and I think that's essential. And it has to be in the 6 most spoken languages, and I think there needs to be some outreach to help people complete it, because it is not, we typically get a very high percentage, almost 100% of our responses are from English-speaking members of our community. I think we also have to keep in mind, and some of these questions have been asked, but I'm just going to reiterate them, the staffing implications of this. It's real, because majority of people who work in Fairfax County do not live here. And they have adjusted to the start times for their children in a different system. It's also one of the reasons why we work so hard to work with other jurisdictions when we do a calendar every given year regarding what we're going to do for holidays. But I think it's essential. And I do have a question. I have two. Community school use. Do we have an MOU regarding access? Like, are they guaranteed a percentage of time? Because if some of these shifts happen, they're going to lose use.
Miss Lady, they are not guaranteed a specific amount of time. The way the scheduling happens is we schedule all the school-related and school organization items on there quarter by quarter. Once we have that locked in, then we give to the county the access to the schedule to fill in the open blocks.
Are they aware of this conversation?
I'm looking at my teammate back there, Paul, and he's shaking his head yes, so yes, they are. Hey, Paul, if you want to, you got to grab a mic right there by you.
My understanding is this on? My understanding is Prismatic did interview NCS colleagues about this project.
That's true.
And so they were then provided that there might be elementary children not getting out till, or middle schools not till 4:45 and 2 hours of after school.
At the time that we interviewed them, we had not developed options. We asked them open-ended questions about what if it changes by this much, what if it changes by 2 hours, we asked them a lot of open-ended questions because that was done in the spring and summer. We did not have options at the time, specific options.
I think we're going to have to do that. It impacts a lot of people. A lot of parents spend a lot of money for their kids to play on teams, and they need access to fields and gyms. I have a question for Mr. Horn. I'm sitting here looking at Stonebridge High School's bell schedule, and they dismiss at 4:18. I think that's an average thing for high schools in Loudoun County. And it was my understanding at the time that several of them started running practices before school. Is that the case? And if in your counterparts in Loudoun County, was this smooth sailing for them to shift to such a late release time for high schools in terms of athletics?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think as Mr. Muick alluded to, or Mr. McIlvain, the athletics will flow to the times that are available. So Loudoun County did see some experience with individual schools and teams based on coaches' availability, gym availability, wanting to access schools for practice before school. It has not been a massive thing. It's not like all freshman basketball teams have moved to the morning, but it becomes an option for flexibility. In addition, the 4:18 start time for them, much like us, doesn't necessarily impact their commuting, but they do have some of their smaller schools which do compete outside of the Loudoun County area, which do require some early dismissals from school in order to reach, again, freshman basketball times or JV baseball times, 5:30 starts, those kinds of things. A time for us after 4 p.m., and we have shared in other forums that most of our high school programs can't access buses until 4:45 or 5 o'clock now because high schools are not the last to dismiss. If a schedule was created where high schools were the last school to dismiss, that time probably wouldn't need to shift. We would still have buses for our kids at 4:45 or 5 o'clock.
Thank you. And I should have said at the outset, I 100% want kids to get more sleep. You're talking to someone who is not a morning person at all. And it was awful for me all those years until we shifted for me to even get to work on time. So I appreciated the swap with middle schools. And again, I think it was more seamless because it was simply a swap. I mean, so there is repercussion. We're back at the table because it's not the appropriate time for middle schools to start. So I don't want to say that went smooth sailing and we haven't heard any repercussions. We're sitting here because of the fact it's not smooth sailing. So again, I have consternation over unanswered questions, data we don't have, properly advertising this so that because again, once this went out as a work session, my email flooded with people against us doing anything. And I hadn't heard that at all. I had only heard community participation at the actual board meeting, so I didn't expect that. Well, I'll take a go back.
Thank you, Ms. Lady. Ms. St. John Cunning, followed by Ms. Dixon.
So I'm going to be doing some follow-up too, because at our first session, I did ask about the survey and who answered it, what the percentages was, what the languages were. And you noted this on page 22, you said other than middle school students and middle school staff, the number of the fall 2024 survey responses from students, parents, and staff were less than desired and may not be representative of the total population. You went on to say, while unfortunate, Prismatic does not believe these factors substantially weaken the analysis presented herein. So my question to you is, what is the confidence interval that leads you to believe that the analysis is statistically significant?
With this kind of surveying work, confidence intervals would not be advisable because I have no control over who chooses to respond and who does not choose to respond. We did not do a targeted sampling process like you would do in order to be able to provide statistical significance assurances. I think that in terms of ensuring that we got a broadly representative set of viewpoints, we have definitely covered that. If you look at the survey results, there are people who are adamantly against making any change. There are people who want any change at all, and there are people who are very specific in terms of what they want. It was reassuring to get a decent number of parents who, again, had middle school students, but then also had elementary or high school students, and were able to respond to those questions that were intended for all elementary and high school parents. We did get great results from the middle school students themselves. And to be fair, we were not seeking to survey elementary students. The intent was middle school and high school only. I didn't want anyone to think that we were attempting to survey elementary students. We don't feel that that's generally appropriate. And so, you know, the one place where it would have been nice to really get more input would have been from middle school staff other than middle school staff, because recognizing that with the exception of option D, which we did provide to you as a way to make no change except middle school, the other options require change at all levels. That is something that could be addressed if we decide to do another round of surveying work. The instruments are ready to go, and then we could add those data points in.
So could you tell me what parts of the population are missing from the analysis?
So elementary staff, high school staff are not included in this because we did not get survey responses from them. And then parents of only elementary school students would be an interesting group to hear from. It would be nice to hear from those who chose to answer in a language other than English. I don't know that we could have done anything more than we did, providing it in multiple languages already. But maybe some intentional additional outreach efforts by the school system may get us some more responses there. That would be good to hear.
So I do agree with my colleagues that say that this should be a K through 12 operation, not just middle school, because it does impact everyone within that range. I'm speaking from elementary school. From an elementary school perspective, and having some of those late start times and knowing what it is for staff when school was late and waiting for the late bus and having staff members there at 5 or 6. I've been one of those. So I know what it looks like down on the ground. I think that we need to survey everyone because it's going to impact everyone. Completely on board about changing the middle school start time. Completely on board about the importance of sleep for everyone, including, as one of my colleagues said, us adults. So I'm completely on board with that. I think we don't have enough voices heard. I think that we can get more of this information. As a family liaison, I know how we can get these, as a previous family liaison, I know how we can get these surveys out to our underrepresented population and get those results back. And I think that those voices are often voices that are not at the table. I think that those are the voices that rely on some of their students to take care of their children and also have childcare difficulties. Our responsibility is to not only ensure that our kids are getting rest and are coming to school ready to learn, but also to be responsive to our constituents. And so therein lies the problem and how we operationalize this. And I think that is the hardest thing, and that is what we are all struggling with, is we want it to happen, but we want to be responsive and have the best impact. This is going to sound strange, but the best impact with the least negative impact on certain populations. So I really want to just emphasize that that's where I stand. Completely support this effort. It's just how we operationalize it. I do want to note that on page 67, there was a statement saying that there is no Sunday use of school facilities, and that's not true. So I'd like to have that corrected.
Do you need to go back, Ms. St. John County? Okay, thank you. Ms. Dixit, followed by Mr. Moon.
Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to actually speak as a parent here as well today. My son was one of the students who was in the first, I guess, year where it changed to 7:30 a.m. middle school start time, and he was in a AAP program, so he had to go to further down middle school because of that. It would take 40 minutes in the bus almost to get to the school. Plus, he was going to the bus stop 6 in the morning, 6 to 6:15, and dark. It was quite far from where, from the house, and he would walk alone, cross the traffic, and so forth. So I'm totally empathizing with every parent who's in the situation, and I just could not understand why are we in this situation where we letting this 12-year-old and 13-year-old going so early in the morning, and that too in dark. So I want to be decisive. I know sometimes you have to take some decisions, and I would totally support any recommendation which are my colleagues and everybody they agree with, which actually takes some action. It is, we can talk about all the issues in the world and everything. There are going to be problems, but at some point, we have to take the right thing. And right now, I'm by the middle school students. I feel for them because they are I think that group, we are forgetting about them. So I think I will ask my colleagues to also think about these 12, 13-year-olds who are really struggling in their school and the start time. I prefer personally option E. But I wanted to ask Prismatic team and maybe Andy that how much cost it will incur if we change only the middle school start time to 8:30 or 8 p.m. and not change any other. I know it's going to cost. I just wanted to know what the number would be.
So option D only moves the middle schools, and we selected an option that wasn't, noon or 10 a.m. for middle schools. If you went to something later than what we have as 9 a.m. for middle schools, that estimated 75 to 150 buses would obviously go down. But we didn't want to load the question. But option D looked at just moving middle schools and what that would cost, moving them to 9.
But it only says 9 a.m. Is it a reason why 8:30 was not considered?
8:30 was more expensive.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, we were trying to pick something that seemed like a reasonable possibility. And obviously, I think looking at the options, okay, option D, if we moved to 9:30 for middle schools, it's going to go down below the 75 bus threshold for sure. 8:30 gets very expensive. You already have about half of your elementary schools at 8:30. And then you don't have enough time between your 8 and your 8:10 for your high school and your secondary to really have many buses available to then serve middle school.
Okay, in that case, I prefer option E, just because it has no cost on it. But I definitely want some changes instead of like another year of having no change to this middle school students. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moon, followed by Mr. Dunn.
I'm hoping that we'll make some decisions tonight, whatever they may be. With that said, let me start with this question first. When the RFP was issued back in November 2022, was there a school board goal, state school board goal, to have a middle school start time start after 8 o'clock? Was it a stated goal, or was that aspirational goal, or was that
The RFP itself, sir, indicated that the scope of work was to develop school start times for middle school at or after 8 a.m.
I understand about that RFP, but I am looking at your report on page 21. When it's November 2022, it says, FCPS released an RFP requesting a consulting firm to develop an action plan to help school board of a Fairfax County Public Schools attain its goal of starting middle school times onward after 8 a.m. So I'm asking, because I was not serving on the board at the time, whether there was already a stated goal of the then board. Some of the board members who were serving on the time probably would remember that. Could somebody answer whether there was a stated goal?
I'd be happy to answer if I'm recognized, or at least share some thoughts.
If you want to cede some of your time to Dr. Anderson, that's fine. Go ahead and start the timer.
I'll be very quick. The last board looked at this issue in 2020, 2021. We ended up having to pause because we were in the middle of COVID. But the intention, it was a goal that we take care of the middle school times because it was the second part from what your board did with the high school times.
Okay, so that's already a stated goal in which we do not have to repeat because that's been a stated goal unless this board wants to reverse that goal. Again, I'm not in any way in favor of reversing the goal, but I don't know whether Mr. McElveen was asking for board's consensus again to restate that goal. Whether that is necessary, if you feel that is necessary, I'll be more than happy to support that. But if that is already stated goal of the school board, that's a stated goal. Just when and how that's going to happen, maybe. So with that in mind, I want to ask if the board wanting to implement this starting from 25-26 school year as opposed to 26-27, what's the latest time we have to make a definite decisions?
Mr. Moon, you're asking if we wanted to implement it this coming fall.
Correct. When do you have to make a final decisions by for your department to be able to implement it?
Can I answer that?
I am just trying to see whether that's feasible, all right?
Can I answer that question from two perspectives?
However, how many
So-
different perspectives you have, please?
Yes, sir. From a transportation perspective, making that change, they would be able to do it, and they could do it with a decision that doesn't leave anybody else a lot of time. The second perspective is everything that we've heard here tonight in terms of that change management, the community, maybe getting more input that we didn't get this first go round in some areas that, surveys, after school, things like that. I think we need and want that time till 26, 27 to be able to get all that information and really implement it right. And our routing system coming on, everything. If you just looked at us in a vacuum, I don't think that would do the whole greater system the justice it needs.
I understand. I only have 21 seconds left, so I'm going to be quick. It sounded as if, Mr. Mew, you want to have a little more time than us forcing our system to implement something starting from the next school year. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I will let you go back.
Got you down, Mr. Moon. Mr. Dunn, followed by Mr. McDaniel.
Can you please explain what you meant when you were talking about you're concerned about runtime reductions, which is the third to last row on your option summary there?
Yes, sir. So if you see the current column there where our run time is 110 minutes, so the morning run of a bus that has its run is going to be picking up middle school, doing a high school or a secondary run, an elementary school run from start to finish for the system, for Paul's group, is 110 minutes. So when you look at some of those other options on there that shave it down to 100, 90, 80, that's Prismatic's confidence in our routing team and in what they expect we'll gain with the new routing system that we're implementing. And our team As confident as we are in ourselves, it just seems like a big risk, cutting 30 minutes. We've seen some other districts do some much smaller things and not have any success with tile routing or other systems, and it was just a little bit, I guess we were just being more conservative than Prismatic.
So does shorter run times mean it costs more to run the school buses? Like if you run the bus more, it's more efficient? And do shorter run times also mean harder to have enough employees?
Well, it comes down to having enough drivers and buses to cover that. If you throw onto that what's happening now with more federal workers going back to work and the traffic patterns are going to be different, and probably more dense, more crowded, we're just not sure on going after that.
So just for a layperson who's not in the transportation field, shorter bus runs means greater risk because you don't know if the bus will get to the school on time and be able to pick up kids when they're expecting to be picked up. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you explain on slide 4 for option 2, you says for C2, it says change is concentrated at the middle school level. And I see that, the middle schools move by pretty much 2 hours, but you still have elementary school and high schools moving by about half an hour or so. So what does that mean, change is concentrated at the middle school level?
That's kind of what we felt when we were looking at that option that it was. And it was that the main focus in there and change was middle school, but you're right, it probably covers, as Ms. Anderson pointed out, there's nothing that is just middle school. There's going to be impacts everywhere.
Can you elaborate more? There's a recommendation for a pilot. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because there hasn't been any discussion of that. And where could that pilot conceivably happen? Have you had any discussions about specific high school pyramids?
We have not had any discussions about any specific high school pyramids yet. We thought that might be an option to gain some information on whatever option we decided to go with on the change, if we could put that into probably 1 or 2 pyramids, because there is certain crossover in terms of transportation use by adjacent pyramids. So we hadn't looked at which ones made the most sense yet, just because we had it on there as a potential to maybe gain some intel moving forward.
One of my colleagues mentioned, conversations with potential user of community use. Has there been any discussion with the county about potential impacts on the SAC program?
No, sir, not yet.
Okay, I think that definitely needs to happen. So looking at the data, like just doing the math, it shows on page 2-9, 75% of middle school students who were surveyed said they want to start between 8 a.m. and 8:30 a.m. Was that considered at all in developing these options?
Yes, we're the primary users of the survey data, and we use that as input, recognizing that we did provide options that included that twice. So the 8 a.m. In option E and the 8:45 in option A comes close to what they were looking for. I think that the open-ended responses of the survey data indicated some similar fears that adults also reflected, that, while I would really, really like to start school at 9, I'm worried about how that changes everything else in my life. And so we took that into consideration as well.
And I also see on page 2-14 that 60% of middle school parents who were surveyed, and I agree we need to survey high school and elementary, but 60% of parents want middle school start times between 7:30 and 8:30 a.m. And so it just seems like some of these options that we're looking at that are 9 a.m. or well after 9 a.m., nearly 10 a.m., are well outside the ballpark for what both students and parents said. So was that considered in developing these options?
Yes, I think that what we have to balance is what the public would like to have and what is possible, recognizing that one of the RFP objectives was to be cost minimal, to cost neutral if possible, and then reflecting the greater body of research. One of the things that was pretty abundantly clear with at least a section of the people that we talked to in the forums was that there was not a clear understanding of the recommendation to start after 8:30, or the potential negative outcomes for their students. And so we did provide some options with that. I think that the bigger learning point in the preferred school start times questions that we looked at was that there is a substantial tendency to want the status quo. And so that was something that we recognized that is going to be, it would need to be addressed in moving start times. But the middle school students, parents of middle school students, if you look at Exhibit 2-3, 26% of them did choose status quo and 72% chose something that was later. That was in contrast to some of the other ones where we actually had 24% of elementary students wanted something earlier than they currently have. And so there is a body, there is a population that definitely is status quo, and there is a population that is interested in making a change.
And in line with that status quo, we have the principals of elementary, middle, and high schools jointly recommending that we maintain current start times, expressing severe concerns that we're going to have a huge exodus of staff, and that staff themselves are fearful and upset. That really concerns me. And it may not have been in the RFP, so it may have been a flawed RFP, but was there any consultation with child care providers or any analysis of child care availability options if we do change, especially for both staff and for parents/caregivers?
So one of the things that it was required by the RFP was looking at case studies, and we did do case study work with a number of other school systems that had implemented later school start times, essentially looking for what are the rocks in the road if you do make a change. And Anne Arundel is a great example, and because it's right next door and almost similar in size, they addressed the child care issue head-on as part of their change management process. They will tell you that one of the things they thought was a big star in what they did was held child care fairs to help connect parents with options. They were very communicative with the providers out there. They have a whole communications package that their communications director has shared with other Maryland school districts for when they make a start time change, and they reported no problems. And so I recognize that, and this was brought up in December, that childcare is a burning, pressing concern in this school system, in this county. It was, it was not brought up as a part of our work that if we don't think there's enough childcare slots, we shouldn't recommend something. That was not part of the process.
And finally, I'll just say we're at a time of big changes for a lot of our residents who are federal employees. It's very dangerous to implement this disruptive of a change at a time when we don't know what the scenario will look like a year from now for many of our residents.
Well timed, Mr. Dunn. Mr. McDaniel?
Thank you. I share some of the concerns about the survey methodology and the sample sizes and the lack of some of the translation. I won't beat up on that too much, but we got a letter today from SEPTA. I think we all got that letter. And the concerns that they raised that I wanted to make sure got discussed or at least addressed here is about from their point of view, the lack of data regarding special education students and how the bus routing surrounding special education services could be impacted by any of the myriad of options on the table. So if staff could address that, I would appreciate it.
You want me to?
Yes, sir, I'll start. I may need Paul to jump in there a little bit, but for the special education support and runs, they have their own set of buses and systems, right? So they have 320 buses, about 350 runs in the morning and the afternoon, and some midday stuff, midday runs as well. And it seemed similar to the lunch period and the blocks that we would be able to slide that left or right as well to keep that consistent. Paul, you want to jump in there if I'm getting that right?
You know, I'll just jump to add. Typically, our average special education bus route is typically around that 40-minute time frame for a bus ride for a SPED student. Of course, when you have very specialized programs that you have to transport from one end of the county to another end of the county, you'll have those isolated incidents when you start to creep up closer to an hour. So I think regardless of whatever the times are that you have in any of these options, you're still going to have those instances where that happens, because a lot of it is surrounded by the availability of programs, which is outside of the scope.
I appreciate that response. I'm hearing information that conflicts with the response, and I think it really underscores the need to bring the special education community further into this conversation as we continue to go down this route. I doubt we're going to have an answer tonight, but they need to have a seat at the table further as we continue to do this. The question at hand, at least from my point of view, was whether or not we can change middle school start times to later in a reasonable way that's somewhat cost neutral or not a unreasonable cost. One of the challenges with outlining 6 options, I guess technically 7 options, is we're going to struggle to get consensus around anything at this board, much less in the community, because you have so many options on the table. The only one of those options that actually does what, the outset was, which was to move start times for only middle school, I think is option D, right? Is that fair? Okay, so if it was just option D versus status quo, then I can say, all right, well, do I want to spend $6.5 to $17 million or do I not? The answer to that right now is no, not in this budget environment. But Dr. Reed, I will ask this question. As we have discussed, one of the goals of the boundary work that we're doing is to reduce transportation costs. Do we see the possibility that in reducing transportation costs, option D at 6.4 and 6.4 to 17.3, that's a pretty big delta. Can someone kind of dig into that costing number a little bit more?
Sure. So the 6.4 million is equated to the 75 buses with the methodology for costing it out that was provided back in December in that packet. If you were to ask, which side do we think it will land on, regardless of attendance boundary adjustments, it'll probably be closer to the 75 than the 150. For context, $6.4 million in a $206.9 million transportation budget is not a large, more than, I forget what the number is, percentage increase. And one of the things that we did do as part of our initial work when we sat with board members was to ask us to define what would be considered a substantial or not a minimal fiscal impact. The one number that we did get was around 10 million would start to be a problem. But we wanted to point out that D could cross that barrier. The thing that is not considered in there is what refinements might take place with routing software itself. One of the things that is coming out with the tablets will give you the ability to actually know how many students are riding the bus each day, with the idea that you would then be able to dynamically route. If you only have 10 kids out of 75 assigned riding a bus regularly, that route should be adjusted. We were able to provide load factor data based on spring of 2024 rides, what drivers reported, and those data indicate that there is room to make adjustments like that, which is why I say 75 is more likely than 150.
Okay. And did I hear you correctly earlier saying that under option D, if you bumped middle school from 9 to 9:30, the costs would drop off?
Potentially, yes.
Okay. My recommendation would be to go back, take option D, look at 7:30, 8, 8:30, 9, 9:30, everything else stays the same, and give the costing numbers right there, if that's something that can be done, because that does in fact answer the question of middle school start time changes without impacting anything else.
The 7:30 goes against the RFP requirements.
Well, I mean, status quo, so status quo. So current,
Okay.
yeah. So your baseline and then add so 7:30, the baseline, 8, 8:30, 9, 9:30, and then see which of those makes most sense. And potentially, my time's up, but if the boundary savings could possibly fund that.
Thank you. I will take a turn, then we'll go to go backs. I brought this concern up the previous time, I'm going to bring it back up again, but every single option except for E, and C2 a little bit less, but every single option reduces the runtime. Every option except for C2 reduces the runtime by 20 to 30 minutes. That is a significant change in runtime. How confident are you, I'm going to ask you, Dr. Reed, that you can deliver this runtime? And before you answer, I ask this question because the last thing I want to do to a community that is undergoing a lot of change and angst is to promise something we can't actually deliver. So how confident are you in any of these options that have a runtime that's 20 or 30 minutes faster?
So I think Mr. Muick spoke to this earlier. I think there's a concern on the part of our transportation department that we're really going to be able to do that. And we have not been able to model it. So when you ask how confident I am, until we're actually able to model it on the road, in traffic, I can't say that I am confident. I also know that the tablets being available, I believe the tablets, last time I checked, are not going to be available when school starts. So help me with, unless we've been able to negotiate an earlier delivery. I thought we were looking at December.
Yes, ma'am. The routing system will be up and running by the beginning of this coming school year.
Which is August.
Yes, ma'am.
Right.
And we're in the procurement process on an amendment right now for the mobile data tablets, which the board has not seen yet and approved, which is coming through the process now. And then we will be doing a 45-day pilot this summer during summer school to make sure that the mobile data tablets work as advertised, as seamlessly as they said. And if they do, which we feel pretty good that they will deliver, then during the school year of 25-26, we'll start rolling those out. Hopefully it'll all be fully implemented by spring break, maybe sooner, like December, as you
But
mentioned.
spring break of 26.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I just want to manage expectations that those tablets are not going to be ready likely till second semester next year. So if you're asking the confidence, I would not bet my firstborn on this. Maybe my third, but I hope they're not watching. I'm teasing. No, I didn't say that. But I want to say that I think until we can model it, I don't know. I don't have complete confidence.
I mean, I think what I'm hearing from my colleagues, and what I also believe, is that we all want to address middle school start times. As Dr. Anderson said, the previous board started looking at that, and then COVID delayed many things. This was one of them. I think we all want to address this, but I also don't believe any of my colleagues want to promise something that we don't know if we can deliver. And if we have new modeling or new software that can give us much more detailed information on bus runs, that might actually be able to save us more time. And frankly, if we included the special ed buses on there, because with all due respect, having had a special ed kid who was sent to a school outside the pyramid that wasn't that far away and it was a 50-minute bus ride, with all due respect, there was a lot of very lengthy bus rides. Special ed kids spend twice as much time as gen ed kids on the bus, and to not include them in the report is a real disservice. And I'm just going to put that out there bluntly. And so I do think that we need to make sure we're inclusive of our groups when we're looking at shorter bus rides. If we have software that is going to get us more detailed information, especially as traffic patterns may be changing, I think it's a disservice to do this without that data and without really knowing the assumptions of almost all of these, even C2, is shorter bus runs. Without those assumptions being true, none of these can be done. And it sounds like we don't have confidence on whether those assumptions underlying every single option is true and able to be done. I mean, you can't do this. The whole thing falls apart. So I want to change middle school start times. When my daughter was in middle school, she was actually at a secondary school. So the middle school started at the high school start times, which was the earlier start time. So I have also, as a parent, lived the 7:20 a.m. start time. I understand it as a parent, but I also know as a parent, I'd be really mad if I was told a bus would pick up my kid at a certain time to get to school at a certain time, and we consistently couldn't do it because we didn't have the software and information, and I don't want to do that to our community. So I do think that we can make a commitment to change middle school start times, but I don't think we're making a commitment to do it next year because it doesn't sound like we have the confidence that we can actually do it, and that's the last thing I want to promise our community. And I appreciate all the hard work, but the only one that I could see doing is E, because that's the same amount of runtime, and there's a lot of issues with how late those elementary school kids get out. And without asking the elementary and high school kids, I'm not comfortable doing that. I will pause and take a go back, but if anyone wants to comment on what I had to say, I'd be happy to hear it. Dr. Reed?
I think you're correct in your analysis. I mean, if our current run time is 110, I would be confident we could maintain that. My hope would be that we can continue to improve that. I think Mr. McDaniel said with boundaries, one goal was more efficiency for sure, but we won't be initiating the boundaries this fall. I don't know if the new routing, I haven't seen it modeled yet, if the new routing will enable a 20 to 30 minute gain. I don't know. I mean, I have to look at the documents, but if the team isn't sure, then I for sure am not sure, because they're going to have to execute it. So E does provide you the security. I think we could stand behind the runtime for E because it's at 110. And C2, maybe within 10 minutes-ish. I don't know if we can go much further than that. I'd have to rely on Mr. Muick and Mr. Andrade for that.
Thank you. We'll start with Ms. Anderson, then Ms. Marin.
So one thing that I wanted to say is that I agree with my colleague that talked about the fact that I'm not trying to discount the importance of middle school in terms, but I am not willing. Elementary school for most of our schools is the longest amount of time that anyone is in one school. So for us to, and I live in an area of the district, of the county, that many of our elementary schools or elementary school students are on the bus for extended periods of time because of their location. So trying to say that we are going to have kindergartners starting at 6:30, getting on the bus at 6:30 in the morning or 6:40 in the morning, and then having that continue until they're in sixth grade does not seem feasible. So I am significantly concerned that we would have that be the solution. I will also tell you anecdotally, the only option that I have heard the biggest outcry about is E, as an absolutely not. So I think that we will have pitchforks if we pick that particular option because it's untenable for some parents to have their kids dropped off at 9:50 in the morning. So I will say that. I was the 6 years in a secondary school that started at 7:20, so I lived that. What I've noticed that we've done with our secondary schools is we've given them their own unique start time. What I would recommend is if we have strong support from the Mason District at this point because of the fact that they have the only middle schools that have 6 through 8, is there any reason that we can't start with them and give them their own unique start times because of the fact that they are their own unique student body?
I can answer the first piece. None of the options that we developed had more than a handful of civil twilight violations for the first run schools. So 6:30 a.m. pickups for elementary school as a de facto result is not what is included in these solutions.
I'm sorry, but we're still talking about 5-year-olds walking to the bus stop by themselves.
Understood. And so the RFP requirements were no civil twilight violations. We did look at what you currently already have some civil twilight violations happening with middle school students. So I didn't want anyone to get the impression that we have excessively early pickups with some of these, the first tier start times for the elementary schools. And one of the things that plays into that is that your current runs are optimized for your current set of school start times. If you adopt a new set of school start times, the runs would be optimized for that new set, which would change potentially. A 40-minute run for an elementary school might have to be broken up into 2 20s in order not to have civil twilight violations and still get the kids to school on time. That also plays into the runtime window. I will say that in just to be clear, we vetted these with the Transportation Department as being possible. Aggressive, yes, some of them. But what does it mean that we think it is possible that an 80-minute window can happen? It means that there is existing space within the 110-minute window to further refine things. And that's where that comes from. And so that piece should be considered in this. We did not provide solutions that the Transportation Department said, absolutely not, it's not possible.
Okay. And to the second aspect of my question?
Can you remind me of it again? I'm sorry. Oh, the pilot? I think, maybe not call it a pilot, maybe call it a phase one. I do think
I'm not
that-
asking it for it to be a pilot. I'm asking for these 3 schools to be treated differently, the same way the secondary schools are.
I think that, there are some reasons to want within a school district to have some commonality for start times. However, in a district this large, there's no reason not to start someplace with this kind of a change. I think that the benefit to doing something like that is that it would give you plenty of opportunities to understand what the challenges are going to be. You would have real-world data potentially on how many teachers say, no, don't want to do that new school start time and ask to be transferred somewhere else within the system. You would have real-world data on what your new traffic patterns might look like. I see little downside to it. We did take a look, not officially, but we were wondering what it might look like and looked at several different high school pyramids to see how much overlap there is in bus usage between Pyramid A and Pyramid B and Pyramid C. And there are places where there's not a huge amount of overlap. Obviously, overlap, if you change start times here and from start times here, might end up costing you extra buses because I can't now serve both efficiently. And so the fact that there wasn't a huge amount of overlap said, yeah, this is actually possible in this school system.
The other thing that I would just want to put out here is that I understand fully why we need high schools to start at the same time. There is absolutely nothing that says that we can't have middle schools start at different times because they do not have the same program requirements with sports and things like that at the end of the day.
Thank you. You want another go back? All right. Ms. Marin?
These are all really good points, and I'd love to see if we can be flexible for our youngest students who are in middle school. So I just want to share a few things. One about community engagement. You know, we have issues that the board works on because data compels us to, and issues that we come to our plates because community advocacy does, and sometimes it's a convergence of both. And I just would like us to be clear on community engagement because sometimes we hear criticism that, well, what are you doing with my engagement? It's all just, lip service. But I'm just reflecting on a few topics I've worked on in my now 6th year on the board. COVID. 50% wanted closed, 50% wanted open. I could take all the community engagement I wanted. It was not going to be any different. The calendar. Finally, that became something that was operationalized, which this is an operational thing. And so I'm wondering who ultimately is deciding on anything. Is it us or the board? Because the pattern would be that the superintendent would be deciding. Recess, middle school recess, that came to us from the community, but we wholeheartedly supported it, but it took us some time to get it done. And we still need to make it better by providing, the equipment for them. Cell phones, we're there too, and that's come at us all different ways. So, surveys, I agree, and this has been from the prior board too, not everyone responds. Do we want to give people false hope? Again, I want to look at the data, and the data say that it's best for kids to have more sleep. So look, if this board is committed to making middle school start times later, then we proceed operationalizing what the system can bear, what time and funds we have. The RFP was designed with available resources that could be dispersed to this change. So we need to have some conversations, again, with the county. 1, community use. We need to be on the same page about planning. 2, school-age childcare. The MOU is from the 1980s. We must update that, and maybe this is that catalyst, thanks, Marcia, to make that happen. It's not our responsibility to figure out everyone's childcare, but we certainly can help. So I think we need to just, if I could finish what we need to decide, what I'm proposing is, do we make a commitment to that change, as Mr. McElvain asked for? Pending that outcome, we make a commitment to either the parallel or the staggered proposal, and then pending that outcome, we decide what the next steps are, including who makes the decision. Is it the board or the superintendent? And then we gotta let the people know. We can't leave them hanging, and I hope that we can do that by tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Marin. Dr. Henderson?
Okay, I'm going to start by answering some of those questions that you raised. Yes, I want to do this.
And I'd like for us to have that vote that we are going to do this. 2, I am fine with what you proposed, Ms. Anderson, to start with the Mason District, to no one's shock ever. So I am fine with doing that because I also think it's probably one of the densest areas, and I'm just guessing by driving around, not because I have any expertise of that. And that would make it staggered, and that would give us the opportunity to learn. And this is, we've piloted with other things, the security thing, we're piloted with 6 schools. This would be 3 schools. So I am all in for that. One of my concerns about the parallel boundary implementation is, what if we don't do the boundary? What if we are delayed with the boundary adjustments, with the boundary changes? Then does this make this a continuous delay as well? Because potentially that could happen. If we're being responsive to our community, we have a lot of noise in our ears regarding the boundary, but we're forging ahead saying this is what's best for the division, this is what's best for our efficiencies, et cetera, all of the reasons. This is also what's best for kids, so we need to carve that out. But I do want an answer to that question.
Yes, ma'am. If something delayed the boundary adjustment review, I think it would be a decision for the board and the superintendent, obviously, to say, hey, we can continue forward with the middle school, with the K through 12 start time changes at 26, 27, and not delay them further.
And I appreciate that, but given all the conversation we're having right now in terms of why they need to be coupled, what would make that any different a year out? Which is, again, continuing delaying what your child experienced, what my child is experiencing. And I have to also share this, I think I said this before, we are also wanting to increase ridership. We have students at the middle school level who are not on the school bus because it is too early for them. They get a whole extra 30 minutes if we drive them. My kid is in one of those places. Because of that additional 30 minutes we can save, not to mention all of the safety issues. One of the other questions that I had regarding the elementary, how is it decided which ones are 8:20 and which ones are whatever the other time is, 8:30 and 9:20? The current, because I imagine it's the same application.
I can answer for the scenarios we developed. It's where it fits. Now, we tried to keep them where they currently were as we started, but where it fits. And that could be a potential improvement on the scenarios is if
Where
all
it
of it is off the
fits.
table, in terms of where it fits in terms of the routing time. And so how many runs did we need to accommodate for elementary school A versus B versus C and what we needed to do there?
Was that the original intent?
Yeah, that's the same intent. Is the amount of elementary schools, of course, is more than the middle schools and high schools. So we wouldn't be able to deliver to all middle schools at the same time, so we have additional tiers to accommodate.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Do you want to go back?
Yes, please.
All right. Ms. Lady?
Thank you. Again, I want to start with just reiterating that I have complete understanding of the biological needs of our kids to get more sleep. But a couple things that they've been stated but indirectly. For the staffing implications, we have backed up the time with which our current staff can enter a transfer window. I think the deadline for them to transfer is April 2nd or 12th, when historically they could do it through the end of June. We have already backed that up. For us to make any decisions right now is going to impact that plan. I thank you, Ms. Dixit, for highlighting how long a bus ride is for an AAP student. And again, overlaying with the boundary work, I think we should have AAP in all of our schools and no longer have centers, because that will address our bus problem in a major, major way. Because that bus, to be full, is going to take longer to get to every single location, which is the same issue with special education, which I would also uplift that we are focused on inclusion and we need community schools. We need to figure out how to service our students' needs in their base school, because that fleet of 320 buses, that probably could be impacted as well. And I do believe our staff have the talents that we can start to look at this from a programmatic perspective, because it's going to save us in funding. I think the thing, to go to Dr. Anderson's point, I think what I keep hearing is this Tyler routing software is the game changer. we're not fully implemented with it. And so in terms of us being able to maybe implement changes to start times K-12 a year from now, even if the boundary work isn't ready, I think that is a viable option because we will have data from that Tyler routing and from the, whatever you're talking about, the tablets you're talking about. It also seems to me, and this is a question, if the runtime is shortened, does that impact salaries? Please stop my time.
No, I don't believe, because we guarantee our drivers 30 hours, so we wouldn't be taking away from the drivers.
Okay. I mean, I get that, but the other thing I want to say is will we still have 4 days after school for middle schools if they go until 3:45 or 4?
You're referring to the late buses? I would assume so. Paul?
I wouldn't assume that would change. The only thing is that, and this all depends on the school, what programs they would offer, depending on the time and how many parents may say, I don't need the programs because school's a little later on. So that's a variable that we wouldn't be able to address.
And I'm going to be out of time, but then that might be we shift to offering some earlier, I don't know. But then that's an equitable issue because everyone has to get there. The last thing I would say is that I think people need to understand, and this is for faculty listening and parents, that one of the benefits when I was at Thomas Jefferson High School was all parent conferences started at 8 a.m. There were no after-school parent conferences because dismissal was at 3:50. And it meant that we had 30 minutes and we had to go to class. And I just want to uplift that because this looks later, but if we moved some of those earlier, that would be great.
Thank you, Ms. Lady. Mr. Moon, followed by Ms. St. John Cunning.
Thank you. It's very intriguing that we can start with the 3 middle schools. Basin District School Board member is very willing to entertain the idea. Correct? Correct. I'll be happy to support that. I'll be happy to support starting from the fall if it sounds as if that can be done. I will support that. And secondly, at the same time, it sounds as if the board members are requesting for additional information, additional survey done, and additional engagement with the special education community and also potentially with the advanced academic community as well. So doing it, making a division-wide, system-wide, a change from the upcoming year will most likely not be feasible that's my assessment of the conversation today. So I'm not going to push for a 25-26 system-wide change right away, but however, at the same time, even though it's been a goal, stated goal of the school board, last board, I want to have a consensus of this board to bring a change in due time. At the same time, we let, there will be a disappointed people who wanted to have this change to be done in the fall. Let them know that we, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do that, rather than giving them false hope. That's one. And also, as far as start time for middle school is concerned, I am very reluctant to entertain anything going beyond 9 a.m. That's a huge change from a current 7:30 to, that's even 9 o'clock is 90 minutes. That's a lot of change for a lot of families, a lot of staff members. So that will be my bottom line for the change.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. Ms. St. John Cunning, followed by Ms. Dixon.
So I want to go back to what we were talking about earlier about community engagement and data. And I think that comparing, engagement with the boundaries versus this is completely different because we had very robust year-long opportunities for community engagement and voices for boundaries. And we had a survey. And if we look at the numbers and we look at the percentage and we look at the numbers of how many people actually answered this, it's apples and oranges. And I think that that's critical because that's how we bring our community along with us. I know one member in my community that is a very active parent that wanted to fill out the survey, and the window closed, and they never got to fill out the survey because it was a week window. They never got to get it. It's an English speaker. They've pulled their son out of middle school in Fairfax County, and they're now in private school because of the middle school start time. They weren't able to have their voice heard. So I think that the way these surveys were done were not adequate. And I feel that we need to have that input so that we can bring our community along with this. That's the one thing that I wanted to mention. The other thing I wanted to mention is please talk to your principals and please talk to your staff members. Those letters that were sent by principals, I had several principals reach out to me and say, I did not agree with that letter. I then made phone calls to other principals that said, I did not agree with that letter. So it is incumbent on us to find out what people feel in our community, including our principals, including our staff members. So when I got a couple of calls saying, I want you to know this letter came out, did not agree with it. So please, I urge all of you to make those phone calls, because it sounds like these organizations are all at lockstep. They're not.
Thank you. Ms. Dixit, followed by Mr. Dunn.
Thank you. This is a really great conversation, and I think we're going through somewhere brainstorming right now, but I think we're heading somewhere. I like the idea of just doing this pilot for Mason District right now, and also trying the software, and then kind of going from there at this moment. But I don't want this to be another situation where we wanted to have middle schools in Mason and there's a pilot and then we'll do it all across county, and then this also becomes that. So we have to stay on task. We have to be committed to this. And I, as a parent, I'd say nothing else, worried me by sending my son in dark to that bus stop every morning. And also, I'm still seeing a lot of sleepy middle schooler in the morning. I don't see them bright and chirpy and going to school with a smile. Maybe there are some. I have seen more sleepy kids, and they sleep on the bus. So actually, especially with the long commute time. So I do want to support this for a pilot, and I want to say that even for high school students, TJ has a great start time. I always admired that they had it, and there because of the distance of commute, I guess. But that's exactly the students need, especially kids who are doing a lot of sports, APs and IB programs. They have a lot of homework. I know students sometimes stay up till 1 o'clock at night and then they have school in the morning starting at 8. So it's overall pushing the school a little bit late I think is a good thing. So I'll just say that I support the Mason District program right now. Thanks.
Mr. Dunn?
Your analysis is based on current school boundaries, is that right? So these costs, if we change the boundaries, the costs, the times, the runs will be different, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, so that gives me pause. When we talk about doing a pilot, totally supporting my colleague, but which of these options are we talking about doing in the Mason District? And what are the costs of that pilot? I'd like to know that.
Yes, sir. Before we get too far down the path of changing just 3 middle schools, it would require us to be able to find more drivers and have more buses applied to that. Because the way you build a route with the limited number of drivers and buses we have, a bus is going to go and pick up a middle school and then an elementary school and then do a high school or secondary, whatever that run is. And if you can't change the times on just one of those in that group, right? Because if you change that middle school time, it impacts how does that bus get to, the schools following it or before it. You know what I mean? They're all interlinked. So unless I have a dedicated group of drivers just to go at those 3 middle schools, We need time to look at it to see if we can do that and how.
And when you go and look at it, will you come back to say which of these options are feasible to do just for the Mason district?
Well, I think when we were talking about a pilot, we were looking at, the pilot would be in a full attendance pyramid, right? So you would have, South County pyramid, and you would have the elementary schools, the middle school, and the high school in that pilot, and they would all be linked because those buses are picking up and doing the middle school, the high school, and the elementary school. So you can link them all together. So if we just said, hey, change the times for the 3 Mason District middle schools, I don't know yet. I'd have to go back and take a look at that and see how that impacts the current resources we have. And Paul, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think it's the same methodology. You'd have to really look at how the whole pyramid interacts with each other. So it would be ill-advised to make one just for those 3 middle schools without making changes to everything else.
And for this pilot, could the school board direct you to, could the school board pick any of these options that are up on the screen right now and say, we want you to do those school times for the Mason district? Or would you have to come back and tell us which options are feasible for those pyramids?
I think it's within the board's purview to direct as they wish. I think that, at the system level, those are the costs that are there. Obviously, if you're doing a piece of anything other than D, there may be additional costs for 3 schools, for 3 attendance zones that would not be at run rate with all of them because of the attendance boundary issue and buses that cross attendance boundaries. I think we would have to look specifically at the 3 middle schools in the Mason district, but option D gives you the cost for just moving middle schools at the system level. We'd have to look and see, is the answer then 75 divided by number of 26 middle schools, 23 plus 3 secondaries, or is it a little bit more than that? And then 150 divided by the same number.
Well, thank you. And I think just whatever happens next, I think listening to the voices that have been raised in this report, and it is an excellent report, by the way, very thorough. Certainly I appreciate my colleague's point about the principals, but when the union speaks, when a principals association speaks, I listen because that's their job to represent. And when the students speak in the survey, 75% telling you a time frame and 60% of parents speak giving you a time frame, I think those should be determining factors. But we also need to gather the data that's been noted by my colleagues as missing.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Seeing no other go-backs, I have 3 for go-backs, but did you want to turn? Otherwise, I will take a turn. I understand that the run times were suggested, thinking they could be done. But when I asked about that in the first work session, I was asked if they were driven as opposed to just, and the answer I was given was, well, we just have new software. And now what I'm hearing is the new software isn't going to be ready until next year. And so as much as I understand the impetus to do a pilot and it's a creative solution, without even knowing the software for the runtimes, I don't even know how we would do a pilot. And if you just do it in middle schools, I don't know how that would impact the elementary schools. They feed to different high schools. I think that's an interesting thought to look at, but I think it's difficult today to know. That's the first thing. The second thing I want to mention is that we just had a budget work session where we talked, and I know you may not be, where we talked about collaboration with the Board of Supervisors and partnering with the Board of Supervisors. And many of these changes are going to impact community use. It's going to impact SAC, which some of my colleagues talked about. We've talked about the disruption to our community, and they're going to have to make childcare changes with the community. I know in the survey it said 66% of middle schoolers said they did not take care of an elementary school student after, which tells you a third of them do. That's not a small amount of middle schoolers that are taking care of a elementary school student after school. And I'm not saying our job is to make sure that they are there to do that, but our job is to minimize this disruption, and whether that's to 3 middle schools or a lot of middle schools. I don't think it's good change management, and the goal is to collaborate with our Board of Supervisors and to collaborate with our community. I just don't think it's good change management to do this that quickly. But a third of our middle schoolers are taking care of someone after school. We got to give our families time to figure that out. And whether that's 3 middle schools or not, I just don't think you make that quick of a change like this, and especially when we haven't driven the runs, and especially with traffic changing. So I really think we have to be thoughtful in how we do this, because I don't want to have to undo it. And with potential boundary changes and shorter transportation times, there's a risk of either being inefficient with resources down the road or undoing things. So my 2 cents. I will go to go backs. Ms.
Ms.
Sanders.
Sizemore,
I'm sorry,
Could I
apologize.
just maybe take a second to eliminate a
Yes,
little
yes.
bit of confusion? We started working with Tyler Routing last year, and at the time that we moved into developing alternatives and the Prismatic working on that, Tyler Routing provided what they call a sandbox. So it was an exact replica of our routing system that Prismatic could use to develop these runs. So while we didn't have somebody in a bus out driving the runs, they had the same system that our team is going to be using, and they were able to go in with the exact stuff we have, the exact routes, the schools, the stops, and to manipulate to get to these alternatives. So I wanted to make sure that was clear, because I thought that's what we mentioned in December, and you had just mentioned that it was unclear. So I just wanted to make sure I maybe got some of that confusion out of there. And they were in there doing the actual runs in there, and like run B, when it's shaved 30 minutes off the run time, Prismatic feels that we can do that. It goes back to the risk willingness of us and some of the situations people said about, hey, taking that risk and kids sitting out there waiting, we don't meet it. We want to see how that goes.
And if I could just clarify, we did not build entirely new runs. We used the runs that you already have that you're currently running, which is what was input into the new software. There were very limited cases where we would break apart runs, so we would split a run into 2 pieces in order to meet some civil twilight potential problems, or to make it so that the new way of stacking elementary to middle to high, or vice versa, would fit. But we use what you're currently doing as the basis.
Right, well, I'm out of time, so I'll respond to that in my go back, but thank you for that clarification.
Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, are we doing 2 minutes or 1 minute for go backs?
Oh, I believe we were supposed to go till 9. Is that correct? We're scheduled till 9 for the work
To
session? Till 8. Oh, I apologize. I thought it was till 9. I know, right? If I may indulge my colleagues, we only have 4 for go. If we could do 1 minute, that will be a quick round. And if I could just ask staff to maybe keep the responses short. If that's okay with you all, we'll do an extra 15 minutes. Okay.
So 1 minute, sorry.
1 minute, yes, 1 minute. And I'll start with Ms. Anderson, followed by Dr. Anderson.
Just really fast, one thing, we've said multiple times that we're going to break runs up to be 20 minutes instead of 40 minutes. Sometimes that's not physically possible. The kids just live 40 minutes away from the school. So I just want to put that out there. Second thing is with option E, I'm particularly concerned about the high school dismissal time, because of the fact that we have 44 of our fields that are actually given over to the park authority or the county for community use at 5 o'clock. And we're already hearing from our teams that do not have time to get the kids out and get practices through in an equitable way for everybody. And so I just want to say that doing anything that disrupts further, taking that half an hour away from that availability is a big deal for some of our teams. So I just want to put that out there, that I think that we have some more discussion about the different options.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes, thank you. I'll be quick. But one clarification question. Our high school fields are not turned over, they're not utilized for after school because of our own usage, correct? Right?
Can you ask that question again?
The high school fields, and we don't have a lot of community use using the fields in the gyms because of our heavy usage of those.
Paul, can you jump in on that answer?
I can speak to the fields specifically. We currently have an MOU on the second turf fields when they exist at our high schools. And that MOU time, which is expired and needs to be refreshed, it's currently 5:30. when community use turns over. But each school works with their community users to maybe sometimes go to 6. But there is room based on start time to work with NCS on when we turn over those second fields. But because the Park Authority in the county maintains and replaces those secondary fields, they absolutely expect to have significant use of them. As far as gymnasium use times go, NCS takes over when we are done. There is no MOU, there's no specific time when the high school or middle school facilities are turned over to them.
Because those just seem to go on and on and on, especially during volleyball and basketball seasons. Thank you. I will take the rest of my 49 minutes to say this, which is, okay, you wasted 4 of those precious seconds. I will take the rest of my time to say this. You know, the conversation that I heard around this table is to be responsive to our community. I opened up my comments with saying the Mason community has been very, very vocal on this. So I would love to work with my colleagues to find a way for staff to review how we can make this happen for the 3 middle schools. Because I think going through the whole high school pyramid will be disruptive in terms of sports, because you can't have, you know, Justice High School be on one schedule and then they can't get to activities and to games, whatever it is that we need to do with our high schools as well as academies. I see that being a little bit more challenging. And I don't know how it works at the secondary, for the secondary schools, because I don't have any of those, but I would like to see some modeling of what does it look like for those 3 middle schools.
Ms. Marin?
Yeah, look, I requested that we get clear on a few things. I don't think we're there. Are we committed to making a change? That means, we don't know what the solution is yet, but are we committed? I hope that we could, maybe we could vote up or down or whatever. That would be great. Are we committed to parallel or staggered? Can we make that decision? Maybe we don't need to do that right now. But what are the next steps? Dr. Reed, at this point, is this an operational thing? Because we are like so in the weeds, and as far as I know, the only people who are experts in this stuff are those people sitting at the front of the table. So what is our role in this now and in the future? Do we need to tell you, tonight or at a formal board meeting? And we have got to engage the county further on this. Community use and SAC are key pieces. This is not a simple thing. And when I think that this board only got this information in December, and we're feeling like we're rushing to do something, I'm sorry, that's not okay. There's lots of questions. We had an RFP. Then we asked for it to respond to American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations. Now there's a request, which could be a next step, about the Mason District. So we are evolving the work. What is our plan? And when are we making decisions? Because there's people sitting here, and they want to know what's going to happen, and so do I.
Thank you, Ms. Marin. We do have a next steps document that we can use. All right, go ahead.
So I think the history has been that this board wants to make this decision. I believe that's what happened the last time, so I believe it's the board's decision, and we'll implement whatever the board determines.
So
I think it's up, if 7, I guess I'll leave it there, because I think back in, I guess Mr. McElveen or Mr. Moon would have to answer that. At the last time the start times were adjusted, I'm told the board approved those.
So board made those decisions.
So hang on. So I'm thinking what I'm going to say is I don't think it's written that the board has to make this decision. So we could make a decision to make a commitment to making middle school start time changes and asking our superintendent to operationalize that. That is something that we as a board could do. We don't typically take votes at work sessions. But if we want to do a formal motion to say the board is committed to making middle school start time changes and ask our superintendent to operationalize in her best discretion, that doesn't have to be this year. That's something we could do, but it is not something we could do at a work session because we don't take formal votes at work sessions. So I'm going to take my 1-minute turn, and I'm going to then wrap up the meeting.
Ms. Sizemore-Heiser?
Yes.
Mr. Frisch has his hand up.
Oh, I apologize, Mr. Fish. I didn't see. I'll let you take your turn, and then I will take a turn. Mr. Frisch, we can't hear you. I didn't know if you heard me or not. I will take a turn.
I apologize. Excuse me. So, yeah, I would generally be opposed to taking any action in the work session. I think one of the good things about.
Mr. Frisch, we can't hear you. We can hear him.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there seems to be some kind of delay.
There's this weird double play. I'm hearing myself speak back to me. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
I apologize. As I was saying, I generally don't want to take any kind of actions in a work session. That doesn't mean a motion can't be brought to a regular board meeting. I think one of the good things about a work session, next steps in the process that follows, is that it gives board members an opportunity to reflect on what everybody has shared. And I think that's the whole point of a work session, is to offer some time for us to think more deeply about the different points that have been raised. So happy to entertain a motion at a regular meeting, but I wouldn't want that here. And as for a pilot, I think there's a world of difference between a pilot that is intended to see if it could work in other places and just doing a carve out for 3 schools. As we heard from staff, the preferred pilot would be something that could be replicated. And I think, if it was the next step, I'd consider seeing how, I imagine there'd be an expense to carving out 3 middle schools without impacting other schools. Just looking at the other options that we have in the report, anything that minimized disturbance at 2 elementary or high school or whatever, there's a bigger cost associated with that because you need more buses and bus drivers. So, I'd be open to a pilot where we're looking, like staff has mentioned, at an entire pyramid, but I look forward to seeing what everybody brings to the next steps process.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I was going to say the same thing. I think the work session is for us to talk through. There's obviously lots of questions I've heard from colleagues that need to be followed up, and if someone wants to bring a formal vote at a meeting, absolutely, but we don't take votes here at work sessions. A couple things I just want to comment back on, and you can start my time. I just want to comment back on what you were saying about the routing. I do remember that they had access to our routes in a sandbox, right? And the point I was making is that until you drive them, right, kids take different times to get on buses. I tell you the number of times I've been that parent when school starts and the bus is supposed to be there at 8:10 and 8:25 and 8:35, and lo and behold, 3 weeks in, we've moved the bus time, right? Or the kids are getting, it's just human, right? The traffic is hard to predict, and until we can drive some of it, the significant change in routing times gives me pause, and it sounds like there's pause as well, especially with the change of return to work. So I'm just going to leave that there, that I think if we could have just shaved off 20 to 30 minutes off our routing time, I think we would have done that already. So I just think there's a lot of questions with SAC, with childcare, with our staff, I would worry about our special education students and any pilot that isn't replicatable, who are going out of their pyramid, what the impact is on them if we change middle school start times. I think that's a big question before we do any pilot, of what does this impact the kids that we're not thinking about. I'll stop, my time is up. I know we're over our time. I thank you for my colleagues for going late. There's a next steps document. Please put in your next steps on the next steps document. And if anyone wants to bring a motion at a regular meeting, by all means, you're welcome to do that. Thank you for your time.